You think I'd stoop so low as to get some ordinary black house help pregnant? This is too expensive a joke, most especially coming from someone like you. Keisha's trembling hands clutched the pregnancy test as Christopher's face twisted with disgust. You can't just pretend this baby doesn't exist, she whispered, one hand on her pregnant belly. Christopher's laugh was pure venom. Watch me. Good luck proving paternity without my cooperation. Good luck surviving what my legal team will do to you. He destroyed her that night. Fired her. Threatened her and even tried to make her disappear. But the one thing he couldn't control was genetics. Hi, my beautiful family. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. Christopher Kane stood behind his custom oak desk on the 43rd floor of Kane Tower. His 6 feet 2 inches frame wrapped in a navy Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. At 34, he owned half of downtown Dallas, but his steel-gray eyes held no warmth as they surveyed the city sprawling beneath him. The Henderson property closes at 3, Rebecca Lane announced, her heels clicking against the marble as she entered his corner office. His attorney's red hair was pulled back severely, matching her personality. That's another $20 million in your pocket. Christopher didn't look up from the contracts. Money was just numbers now. Points in a game he'd been winning since he clawed his way out of foster care 15 years ago. What would Grandma Eleanor think of all this? The thought stabbed through his mental armor before he could stop it. 2 months since her funeral, and her voice still echoed in quiet moments. Money can't fill the holes in your heart, Christopher. Only love can do that. He crushed the memory. Love was weakness. Love got you abandoned in group homes while your parents chased their next high. Sir. Rebecca's voice pulled him back. Fine. Schedule the closing. He signed the papers with sharp strokes. Anything else? Your housekeeper called. Something about needing to speak with you personally. Christopher's jaw tightened. Keisha Taylor had worked for him for 3 years, maintaining his penthouse with quiet efficiency. Lately, she'd been acting strange. Lingering glances. Nervous energy. He'd noticed but chose to ignore it. Tell her to handle whatever it is herself. That's what I pay her for. Rebecca nodded and left. Christopher returned to his contracts, but concentration eluded him. Through the glass walls of his office, Dallas hummed with afternoon energy. Somewhere in his penthouse, Keisha was probably preparing dinner, moving through his space with that graceful way she had. He shouldn't have touched her. The memory of 3 weeks ago crashed back. Late night. Too much bourbon. Her gentle concern when she found him staring at his grandmother's photo. The way her dark brown eyes held such compassion when she whispered, "She loved you so much, Mr. Kane." One touch led to another. Her soft curves against his hard edges. The way she said his name like a prayer instead of a paycheck. For one night, the ice around his heart cracked. By morning, his walls were rebuilt higher than before. 20 miles across Dallas. Keisha Taylor stood in the employee bathroom of Henderson Elementary, staring at the plastic stick that held her entire future. 2 pink lines. Pregnant. Her hands shook as she tucked her shoulder-length black hair behind her ears. At 28, she'd never imagined this moment would come like this. Not with her boss. Not with a man who looked at her like she was furniture most days. Except for that one night when he looked at her like she was everything. Keisha? You okay in there? Angela Davis knocked on the door. Her co-worker's concern carried through the thin walls. Coming. Keisha splashed cold water on her face, studying her reflection. High cheekbones inherited from her grandmother. Warm brown skin that Christopher had traced with reverent fingers. Full lips that had whispered his name in the darkness. She wore a simple blue dress today, one he'd complimented once. The memory made her chest tight. Outside, Angela waited with worried eyes. Girl, you look like you've seen a ghost. Keisha managed a weak smile. Just tired. Long week. Angela wasn't buying it. As the head custodian, she'd seen every kind of crisis walk through these halls. You need anything, you call me. Promise. Promise. The drive to Christopher's penthouse felt endless. Keisha's 2015 Toyota Camry struggled up the steep parking garage ramp, engine whining against gravity. So different from Christopher's collection of luxury cars parked on the lower levels. His penthouse occupied the entire top floor. Floor to ceiling, large windows showcased the Dallas skyline, but Keisha barely noticed the view anymore. This place had been her second home for 3 years. She knew every corner, every preference, every detail of Christopher's carefully controlled life. The kitchen smelled like the lemon cookies she'd baked yesterday. His favorite. A peace offering for news that would shatter his ordered world. Her phone buzzed. A text from Christopher. Handle whatever you need to discuss yourself. I'm busy. Keisha closed her eyes. Even now, he was pushing her away. She'd seen glimpses of the real Christopher. The man who kept his grandmother's photo on his nightstand. Who sometimes stared out at the city with such loneliness it broke her heart. The man who'd held her like she was precious that one perfect night. But that man lived buried beneath layers of ice. The front door clicked. Christopher's footsteps echoed through the marble foyer. Keisha smoothed her dress and walked to meet him, the pregnancy test burning in her pocket like a secret grenade. He stood in the entryway, loosening his silver tie. Still devastatingly handsome. Still unreachable. I thought I told Rebecca to handle your issue. His voice was cold, professional. This isn't something Rebecca can handle. Keisha's voice came out steadier than she felt. We need to talk. Christopher's gray eyes narrowed. About what? She pulled the test from her pocket, holding it between them like a bridge or a weapon. About this. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Christopher stared at the test, his face cycling through confusion, realization, and finally, rage. When he looked up, his eyes held nothing but ice. You're joking. I'm pregnant. Christopher. 8 weeks. His laugh was sharp, bitter. And you think it's mine? The words hit her like a physical blow. You know it is. I know nothing of the sort. He turned away, walking toward his bar cart. You could have been with anyone. I haven't been with anyone else. The words burst out louder than intended. You know that. Christopher poured 3 fingers of bourbon, his back still to her. What I know is that you're trying to trap me with some ridiculous claim. Trap you? Keisha's voice cracked. I'm telling you we're having a baby. He spun around, bourbon sloshing in his glass. We. There is no we. There's me, and there's the help. Each word was a knife. Keisha felt something precious and fragile dying inside her chest. That night, she whispered, what we shared was a mistake. Christopher's voice was brutal, a momentary lapse in judgment that I regret. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not when he was looking at her like she was nothing. The baby is yours, Christopher. His face twisted with disgust. Mine. You think I'd stoop so low as to get some ordinary black house help pregnant? His voice rose, echoing off the marble walls. This is too expensive a joke, even for you. The room spun. Keisha gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. The man she'd glimpsed that night, tender and vulnerable, had vanished completely. Get out. Christopher's voice was deadly quiet now. Pack your things and get out of my house. Christopher, please. You're fired. He pulled out his phone. Rebecca. Yes, I need you here immediately. Bring termination papers and that NDA template. He looked at Keisha with pure hatred. And make sure the security clause is ironclad. If she ever tries to claim this child as mine, I want her destroyed. Keisha's world collapsed. 3 years of service, of small kindnesses, of believing she saw something good in him. Gone. You can't just pretend this baby doesn't exist, she said, her voice barely audible. Watch me. Christopher's smile was cruel. Good luck proving paternity without my cooperation. Good luck affording the lawyers you'd need. Good luck surviving what my legal team will do to you if you ever breathe a word of this fantasy to anyone. He walked to the door, holding it open. Security will escort you out. Don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. Keisha walked past him on unsteady legs, her dignity in tatters. In the hallway, she turned back one last time. Your grandmother would be ashamed of you. Christopher's face went white, but his voice stayed steady. My grandmother is dead. And after today, so are you to me. The door slammed shut with the finality of a coffin lid. Keisha stood in the marble hallway, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, carrying the secret that would change everything. She didn't know that in 2 years, those same gray eyes that had looked at her with such cruelty would stare back at her from 2 tiny faces, carrying the memory of the only woman who ever truly loved Christopher Kane. But love has a way of finding its path, even through the deepest denial. The elevator descended 43 floors, each number lighting up like a countdown to Keisha's destruction. Her reflection stared back from the polished steel doors. Red eyes, trembling hands. A woman whose world had just imploded. Security guard Mike Henderson waited in the lobby, his face apologetic but firm. Ms. Taylor, I'm sorry about this. Mr. Kane's orders. Keisha nodded, unable to speak. Mike had always been kind to her, sneaking her extra coffee on late nights when she worked overtime preparing for Christopher's business dinners. Now he had to escort her out like a criminal. Take your time, he said quietly as they reached her car. And Keisha? Whatever happened up there, you're a good person. Don't let anyone tell you different. She drove home in a daze, the pregnancy test still clutched in her sweating palm. The modest apartment complex in Oak Cliff looked shabbier after 3 years of living in Christopher's penthouse world. Faded brick, cracked sidewalks, children's bicycles scattered across brown grass. Inside her 1-bedroom apartment, Keisha finally allowed herself to break down. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deeper than heartbreak. She'd lost her job, her income, her faith in the man she'd foolishly begun to love. But worse than all of that, she'd lost her dignity. Some ordinary black house help. The words played on repeat, each syllable a fresh wound. She'd heard that tone before. From teachers who assumed she wouldn't amount to much. From store clerks who followed her around like she might steal something. From men who thought her skin color made her available for their pleasure but not their respect. She'd thought Christopher was different. Her phone rang. Angela's name flashed on the screen. Girl, what happened? You left school looking like death. Keisha wiped her eyes. I lost my job. What? How? You're the best housekeeper in Dallas. It's complicated. Keisha's voice cracked. Angela, I need to tell you something. Can you come over? On my way. While she waited, Keisha stared at the pregnancy test on her coffee table. 8 weeks. She'd suspected for 2 weeks but hoped it was stress. Her period had always been irregular, especially when she was worried about money. But the morning sickness, the tender breasts, the exhaustion that hit her like a truck every afternoon. The signs had been obvious. Angela arrived with ice cream and tissues, taking one look at Keisha's face before pulling her into a fierce hug. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. They sat on Keisha's second-hand couch, the pregnancy test between them like evidence in a trial. Lord have mercy, Angela whispered. And it's his. He says it's not. Keisha's voice was hollow. Says I could have been with anyone. But you haven't been with anyone else. He knows that. I've barely dated since I started working for him. Barely had time. Keisha laughed bitterly. I was too busy taking care of his life to have one of my own. Angela's eyes flashed with anger. What kind of man denies his own child? The kind who thinks I'm beneath him. Keisha touched her stomach. Angela, the things he said. About me being ordinary. About stooping low. Like loving me was some kind of degradation. That man is a fool. Angela gripped Keisha's hands. You hear me? A stone-cold fool. You're worth 10 of him. Then why does it hurt so much? Angela sighed. Because you saw something in him that maybe was real, once upon a time. But honey, people show you who they are when the pressure's on. He just showed you. They talked until midnight, Angela helping Keisha calculate her meager savings. 3 months of expenses. Maybe 4 if she was careful. The apartment rent was $800, car payment $200, groceries and utilities another $400. She'd been living paycheck to paycheck even with Christopher's generous salary. Now she had nothing. I'll help however I can, Angela promised. And Patricia upstairs, she's good people. Retired nurse. She'll keep an eye on you. After Angela left, Keisha lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Somewhere across town, Christopher was probably sleeping peacefully in his king-size bed, the problem of her eliminated from his perfect world. But the baby growing inside her wasn't eliminated. The baby was real, regardless of what Christopher chose to believe. Meanwhile, in Kane Tower penthouse, Christopher stood at his bedroom window, bourbon glass empty in his hand. The Dallas skyline glittered like scattered diamonds, but he saw nothing. His reflection stared back from the glass, and for a moment he saw his father's face. The same gray eyes that had looked at him with disappointment before walking away forever. You think I'd stoop so low as to get some ordinary black house help pregnant? The words echoed in his memory, and his stomach turned. They sounded exactly like something his father would have said. The man who abandoned him and his mother when Christopher was 7, claiming he couldn't be tied down to that kind of responsibility. His phone buzzed. Rebecca. Papers are drawn up. If she tries to contact you, claim paternity, or go to the press, we'll destroy her financially and legally. I've also prepared an NDA with a substantial penalty clause if she violates it. Good. Christopher's voice sounded foreign to his own ears. Christopher, are you certain about this approach? If the child is yours. It's not. The lie tasted like ashes. And even if it was, I won't be trapped into some fairy tale domestic situation by the help. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Your grandmother always said you had a good heart buried under all that armor. My grandmother is dead. Christopher hung up. But Eleanor Kane's voice whispered in his memory, clear as if she were standing beside him. The hardest thing in life, Christopher, is learning to love someone more than you fear being hurt. But that's where all the real joy lives. He'd buried that wisdom with her 2 months ago. Christopher walked to his dresser, where Eleanor's photo sat in a silver frame. 82 years old when cancer took her, but her eyes had stayed young until the end. Bright blue-green, like sea glass catching sunlight. Eyes that saw good in everyone, even him. Promise me something, Christopher. When love comes into your life, don't run from it. I know you're scared, baby, but love is the only thing that lasts after we're gone. He'd held her hand as she died, promising everything she asked. But facing Keisha tonight, fear had won over love. The same fear that kept him isolated in his tower, surrounded by wealth but empty of warmth. The pregnancy test image flashed in his mind. 2 pink lines. A baby. Maybe his baby. No. He crushed the thought. Keisha was trying to trap him, just like his father always claimed Christopher's mother had done. Using pregnancy to secure financial stability. It was the oldest trick in the book. But even as he told himself this, another voice whispered the truth. Keisha had never asked for money, never hinted at wanting more than the professional relationship they'd maintained for 3 years. Until that night when grief over Eleanor's death had broken down his walls, and Keisha's gentle comfort had become something deeper. She'd been so soft in his arms, so giving, looking at him like he was worthy of love instead of just fear and respect. Christopher threw the bourbon glass against the wall, watching it shatter into 1,000 pieces. Like everything else he touched. Friday morning, September 16th, 2022. Keisha woke to violent morning sickness, barely making it to the bathroom before her stomach expelled what little dinner she'd managed the night before. The baby was making its presence known, regardless of its father's denial. She showered and dressed carefully, choosing her best outfit. A black pencil skirt and cream blouse that made her look professional. Today she would start job hunting, and she needed to look capable despite feeling like her world had ended. But first, she had to retrieve her personal belongings from Christopher's penthouse. The security desk called up when she arrived at Kane Tower. After a brief conversation, Mike Henderson appeared with a cardboard box. "Mr. Kane had building services pack your things," he said apologetically. "Said you weren't to go back upstairs." Keisha looked inside the box. Her extra shoes from under the kitchen sink. The small cactus she'd kept on the window ledge. A coffee mug with "World's Best Teacher" that she'd used during lunch breaks when she tutored neighborhood kids for extra money. 3 years of her life reduced to one cardboard box. Did he say anything else?" she asked. Mike's expression was grim. "Ms. Taylor, I've worked security here for 8 years. Seen a lot of people come and go. But I never seen Mr. Kane look as angry as he did last night. Or as scared. Scared. That man's got everything money can buy, but he's the loneliest person I know. You were the first person I ever seen him smile around. Real smiles, not the fake ones he uses in business meetings." Mike lowered his voice. "Whatever happened between you two, don't give up on yourself. You got something special, and deep down, he knows it." Keisha drove away from Kane Tower for what she thought would be the last time, Mike's words echoing in her mind. Christopher had looked scared. But fear wasn't an excuse for cruelty. Fear wasn't permission to reject his own child. The job hunt was brutal. 3 housekeeping agencies, 2 hotels, and a cleaning service. Everyone wanted references from her previous employer. When she explained she couldn't provide one, the interviews ended quickly. By afternoon, she was exhausted and discouraged. The baby wasn't showing yet, but she felt different. Heavier. More fragile. The knowledge that she was carrying life made every rejection feel like a threat to her child's future. Her phone rang as she sat in her car outside the 4th rejection. Unknown number. "Ms. Taylor? This is Rebecca Lane, Mr. Kane's attorney." Keisha's blood went cold. "What do you want?" "I'm calling to inform you that any attempt to contact Mr. Kane, claim paternity of your alleged pregnancy, or discuss your former employment with media or other parties will result in immediate legal action." Legal action for telling the truth? Rebecca's voice was ice. "We have resources you can't imagine, Ms. Taylor. Enough to destroy your credit, your reputation, and any chance of employment in this city. Mr. Kane is prepared to be very generous in exchange for your permanent silence, but he's also prepared to be very destructive if you choose a different path." The line went dead. Keisha sat in her car, hands shaking with rage and fear. Christopher wasn't content with rejection and cruelty. He wanted to erase her completely. That evening, Keisha sat across from Patricia Morrison at her kitchen table. The 60-year-old retired nurse had moved in upstairs 6 months ago, and they developed a quiet friendship based on shared evening walks and Patricia's excellent sweet tea. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," Patricia said, her gray hair catching the lamplight. "This man got you pregnant, denied the child, fired you, and now his lawyer is threatening you to stay quiet? That's about the size of it." Patricia's weathered hands folded around her tea glass. "Honey, I've seen a lot of men in my nursing career. Rich ones, poor ones, scared ones, and mean ones. But I've never seen a man fight so hard against something unless he knows it's true." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. If he really believed that baby wasn't his, he'd ignore you completely. Men who aren't fathers don't waste time and money on elaborate legal threats. They just walk away. Patricia leaned forward. But a man who knows he's a father and is trying to convince himself he's not? That man will fight like hell to maintain the lie. The truth of it hit Keisha like lightning. Christopher's extreme reaction, the immediate legal threats, the careful destruction of any evidence she'd worked for him. He wasn't acting like an innocent man wrongly accused. He was acting like a guilty man trying to escape consequences. So what do I do? Patricia smiled, and for the first time in 2 days, Keisha felt hope. You do what women have always done, honey. You survive. You protect your baby. And you let time reveal the truth. Because the truth always comes out eventually. Even against someone as powerful as Christopher Kane? Especially against someone that powerful. The bigger they are, honey, the harder they fall. Outside, Dallas hummed with Friday night energy. Somewhere in his tower, Christopher Kane thought he'd solved his problem with legal threats and financial intimidation. He had no idea that the woman he'd discarded was stronger than he imagined. And he had no idea that in 8 months, his world would change forever. The baby growing in Keisha's womb carried more than just Christopher's DNA. It carried the legacy of Eleanor Kane's blue-green eyes, the eyes that had seen good in everyone, including the broken man who was about to become a father whether he accepted it or not. Love, Keisha was learning, didn't require permission. And truth didn't require belief. It simply waited. The morning sickness had gotten worse. Keisha clutched the steering wheel of her Camry as another wave of nausea rolled through her 12-week pregnant body. The parking lot of Sunny Days Daycare stretched before her, filled with luxury SUVs and minivans that cost more than she used to make in 6 months. She'd finally found work, but not the kind she'd hoped for. 3 part-time jobs cobbled together like a patchwork quilt of survival. Morning shift at the daycare, afternoon cleaning offices downtown, weekend catering gigs when she could get them. 16-hour days that left her exhausted and barely covering rent. You're late again, Keisha. Brenda Walsh, the daycare director, stood in the doorway with disapproval written across her pinched face. A thin white woman in her 50s who'd made it clear she was doing Keisha a favor by hiring her without references. I'm sorry. Traffic was bad on I-35. The lie came easier now. She couldn't explain that she'd spent 20 minutes in a gas station bathroom fighting morning sickness. This is your 3rd tardy this month. I run a professional establishment here. Keisha bit back the response that wanted to escape. Professional establishments paid living wages and didn't schedule people for 30-hour weeks to avoid paying benefits. But she needed this job. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. Brenda's eyes narrowed. And Keisha? You look tired. Make sure your personal problems don't affect your work quality. Inside the bright classroom, 15 toddlers ran around like caffeinated squirrels. Keisha's job was to assist the lead teacher, change diapers, serve snacks, and clean up the endless messes that came with caring for 2-year-olds. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was taking care of other people's children while struggling to provide for her own unborn baby. Miss Keisha. Little Emma Rodriguez ran up with a crayon drawing. Look what I made. The picture showed 2 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Who are the people? That's me and my daddy. He comes to pick me up every day at 3 o'clock. Keisha's chest tightened. Her baby would never have that. Never have a father who showed up at 3 o'clock with hugs and car seat installations and bedtime stories. The morning dragged on. Story time, snack time, playground time. Each activity a reminder of the family life her child would be missing. During nap time, when the children lay quietly on their mats, Keisha found herself staring out the window at the Dallas skyline. Somewhere in that forest of glass and steel, Christopher Kane was living his life as if she'd never existed. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw you at the daycare. Thought you might want to know your boss is asking around about you. Might want to keep your head down. A friend. Keisha's blood ran cold. Rebecca Lane was still hunting her, still trying to control her movements. The paranoia that had become her constant companion flared stronger. Meanwhile, Kane Tower, 43rd floor. Christopher stared at the quarterly revenue reports, but the numbers blurred together like alphabet soup. 6 weeks since he'd fired Keisha, and he'd thrown himself into work with manic intensity. New acquisitions, expansion deals, 16-hour days that should have left him too exhausted to think. But he still thought about her. Especially at night, when he walked through the penthouse she'd kept so perfectly organized. The kitchen where she'd hummed while cooking his meals. The living room where she'd carefully arranged fresh flowers every Tuesday. The bedroom where she'd changed his sheets and somehow always knew to leave his grandmother's photo exactly where he could see it first thing in the morning. The penthouse felt hollow now. Sterile. Like a museum instead of a home. "You're distracted." Rebecca's voice cut through his thoughts. She sat across from his desk with a fresh stack of legal documents. "The Henderson contracts need your signature." Christopher signed without reading. "Any word from our former employee?" "She's working 3 part-time jobs. Daycare, office cleaning, catering." Rebecca's tone was clinical. "Living paycheck to paycheck in that apartment complex. No attempts to contact you or the media." Good. But it didn't feel good. It felt like acid in his stomach. Keisha working 3 jobs while pregnant. Struggling to survive because he'd destroyed her stable employment. The woman who'd cared for his home with such dedication now scrubbing other people's offices to make ends meet. She brought this on herself, he told himself. Trying to trap me with a pregnancy claim. But the justification felt thinner each day. "Christopher." Rebecca's voice held a warning. "You're not having second thoughts, are you?" "Of course not. Because if that child is yours, ignoring it won't make it go away. There are other ways to handle this situation. More permanent solutions." Christopher's head snapped up. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we think strategically. A lump sum payment in exchange for her signing away any future claims. Relocation assistance to another city. Maybe another state. You want me to pay her to disappear. I want you to protect yourself from future complications." Rebecca leaned forward. Right now she's struggling, vulnerable, possibly desperate. That makes her dangerous. Desperate people do unpredictable things. Christopher thought of Keisha's face the night he'd fired her. The way her dark eyes had filled with tears she refused to let fall. The quiet dignity with which she'd walked away, even after his cruelest words. She hadn't seemed desperate. She'd seemed heartbroken. "Leave it alone, Rebecca. The current approach is working." After Rebecca left, Christopher walked to his window. 43 floors below, Dallas pulsed with afternoon energy. Somewhere in that sprawling city, Keisha was probably at her second job, cleaning offices for minimum wage. His grandmother's photo seemed to watch him from the credenza. Eleanor Kane's blue-green eyes held the same disappointment he'd seen in her final days, when she'd begged him to open his heart to love. "Promise me, Christopher. When love comes into your life, don't run from it." He'd run from it so fast he'd left scorch marks. Christopher poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon, even though it was barely past lunch. The alcohol burned, but not as much as the guilt that gnawed at him constantly. He'd told himself he was protecting his empire, his reputation, his carefully constructed life. But late at night, when sleep eluded him, he wondered if he was just protecting himself from the same abandonment he'd suffered as a child. If denying Keisha and the baby was really about avoiding the pain of loving someone who might leave him. His father had walked away from responsibility. His mother had died young, leaving him with Eleanor. Everyone he'd ever loved had left him, voluntarily or otherwise. Maybe pushing Keisha away first was just another form of self-preservation. The thought made him reach for the bourbon again. That same evening at Oak Cliff apartment complex, Keisha dragged herself up the stairs to her apartment every muscle aching from 8 hours of vacuuming office buildings downtown. The smell of industrial cleaning chemicals clung to her clothes, making her already sensitive stomach lurch. Patricia Morrison's door opened as she passed. "Honey, you look ready to drop." "Just tired." Keisha fumbled for her keys with shaking hands. "When's the last time you ate a real meal?" The question made Keisha pause. She'd grabbed a protein bar at lunch, crackers for breakfast. Money was so tight that every dollar spent on food felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. "I ate." The lie felt necessary. Patricia was already too kind, too worried. Keisha couldn't burden her with the full truth of how dire things had become. Hum. Patricia's knowing look suggested she wasn't fooled. "I made too much chili. Why don't you come over for dinner?" Pride warred with hunger. Pride lost. Patricia's apartment was warm and cluttered, filled with the accumulated treasures of a long life. Photographs of grandchildren, quilts draped over furniture, the smell of cornbread baking. Everything Keisha's sterile apartment lacked. "Sit down before you fall down." Patricia ladled chili into a bowl big enough to feed a linebacker. "And don't you dare say you're not hungry. I can see your ribs through that shirt." The first spoonful made Keisha's eyes water with gratitude. Real food. Hot, nourishing, made with love instead of grabbed from a gas station convenience rack. "Patricia, I need to tell you something." The words came out between bites. "Someone's been watching me. Following me. I think it's people working for Christopher." Patricia's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "What kind of watching?" "Someone texted me today, said they saw me at work, warning me to keep my head down." Keisha's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think he's having me investigated. That son of a—" Patricia caught herself. "Sorry, honey, but that makes my blood boil. A grown man using his money to intimidate a pregnant woman. Maybe I should give up. Take whatever money he's offering and disappear like his lawyer suggested." "Over my dead body." Patricia's gray eyes flashed with fury. "You listen to me, Keisha Taylor. I've lived 73 years on this earth, and I've learned one thing for certain. Men like Christopher Kane count on women like you backing down. They use their power and money like weapons because they're cowards underneath all that expensive polish. But I'm just one person. How do I fight someone with unlimited resources? By being smarter than him. By surviving. By refusing to let him erase you." Patricia reached across the table and gripped Keisha's hand. "That baby you're carrying? That's your ace in the hole. Because no matter what legal papers he makes you sign, no matter how much money he throws around, he can't change biology. DNA doesn't lie. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is simply refuse to disappear." After dinner, Keisha walked slowly back to her apartment. The October air held the first hint of winter, and she pulled her thin jacket tighter around her growing belly. 4 months pregnant now, though barely showing. The baby was the size of an avocado, according to the pregnancy app she downloaded. Inside her apartment, she opened her laptop and typed Christopher's name into Google. Pages of results appeared. Business articles, society page photos, real estate deals worth hundreds of millions. In one photo from a charity gala 3 weeks ago, he stood in a black tuxedo next to some oil heiress, both of them smiling for the cameras. He looked exactly the same. Handsome, successful, untouchable. As if firing a pregnant woman and threatening her into silence was just another Tuesday for him. Keisha closed the laptop and placed her hand on her belly. "It's just you and me, baby," she whispered. "But that's okay. We're going to be fine." The words felt like a prayer and a promise rolled into one. Meanwhile, at an upscale bar downtown Dallas, Christopher sat at the bar of the Mitchell, nursing his 4th bourbon of the evening. The crowd was the usual mix of Dallas elite. Oil money, tech money, real estate money. His people, supposedly. But tonight he felt like an imposter in his own world. "Christopher Kane. Haven't seen you in weeks." Brad Morrison, another real estate developer, clapped him on the shoulder. "You look like hell, buddy. Everything okay?" "Fine. Just working." "That's what they all say." Brad signaled the bartender for another round. "You know what you need? A woman. Someone to take your mind off business. I know this incredible brunette. Works for one of the museums. Classy, educated, comes from good family." Christopher's stomach turned. "Not interested." "Come on, man. You can't mourn your grandmother forever. Eleanor wouldn't want you to be alone." The mention of his grandmother's name hit like a physical blow. Christopher stood abruptly, throwing money on the bar. "I have to go." He drove through Dallas streets that blurred together in the darkness, bourbon making everything soft around the edges. Without conscious direction, he found himself parked outside Keisha's apartment complex in Oak Cliff. The building looked shabby in the streetlight. Peeling paint, cracked sidewalks, windows covered with cheap blinds. Such a far cry from his penthouse tower. Light glowed from a second-floor window. Was that her apartment? Was she inside, maybe rubbing her growing belly, talking to the baby he refused to acknowledge? Christopher's phone buzzed. "Rebecca. Investigator confirms she's struggling financially. 3 jobs barely covering expenses. No contact with media or other parties. Suggest we maintain current approach." He stared at the text, then at the building where the woman carrying his child lived in poverty while he sat in a car worth more than most people's annual salary. What kind of man have I become? The question followed him home, echoing in the empty penthouse that had never felt more like a prison. Christopher stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the city lights, wondering if somewhere out there Keisha was looking at the same stars and thinking about the future they would never share. In his nightstand drawer, hidden beneath insurance papers and old warranties, lay the pregnancy test she'd shown him that night. He'd kept it, though he couldn't say why. Maybe as evidence of his justified anger. Maybe as proof of her deception. Or maybe as a reminder of the moment his life had changed forever, and he'd chosen fear over love. The test stared back at him, 2 pink lines unwavering in their truth. Somewhere in this city, that truth was growing bigger every day, regardless of his denial. But Christopher Kane had built his empire on control, and he refused to admit that some things, like love and life and the consequences of both, couldn't be controlled at all. The resistance was killing them both, one day at a time. 2 years later, the twins were teething again. Tyler gnawed on his fingers while Mason fussed in the grocery cart, both boys sporting matching red cheeks and runny noses. At 2 years old, they were walking tornadoes of energy, curiosity, and endless needs that Keisha somehow managed to meet on 3 hours of sleep and pure determination. "Mama up!" Tyler reached his chubby arms toward her as she pushed the cart through the produce section of Whole Foods Market on Preston Road. The upscale grocery store wasn't her usual shopping destination, but Patricia had insisted on babysitting today and slipped Keisha an extra $50 with strict instructions to buy something fresh for once instead of those freezer meals. "You're too big for up, baby." Keisha smoothed his dark curls, so similar to her own but with those distinctive eyes that made strangers do double takes. "We'll be home soon." Mason pointed at the bananas with serious concentration. "Nana." "Yes, bananas. Good job." She grabbed a bunch, adding them to the cart that already held organic milk, free-range eggs, and vegetables that cost twice what she usually spent. Patricia's gift felt like luxury, even if it represented less than Christopher probably spent on lunch. The past 2 years had been a marathon of survival. After the twins were born 5 weeks early, tiny but healthy, Keisha had juggled newborn care with work, often bringing them to Patricia's apartment while she cleaned offices late at night. The older woman had become more than a neighbor. She was the grandmother the boys would never have otherwise, the support system that kept Keisha sane during the darkest moments. "Excuse me." A familiar voice behind her made Keisha's blood freeze. She turned slowly, praying her mind was playing tricks. But there he was. Christopher Kane, standing 3 feet away in the organic produce section, looking like he'd seen a ghost. He'd aged in 2 years. Still devastatingly handsome, still impeccably dressed in dark jeans and a white button-down that probably cost more than her rent, but there were lines around his gray eyes that hadn't been there before. His dark hair showed hints of silver at the temples. Keisha. Her name came out like a question, as if he wasn't sure she was real. Tyler and Mason stared at the tall stranger with identical expressions of curiosity, their blue-green eyes wide and unblinking. The same eyes that Christopher saw in the mirror every morning. The same eyes that had belonged to Eleanor Kane. Christopher's face went white. His gaze moved from Keisha to the twins and back again, recognition dawning like a slow-motion car crash. These are... His voice died. My sons. Keisha's voice was steady despite her racing heart. Tyler and Mason. Christopher couldn't stop staring at the boys. Tyler had reached for a grape and was examining it with scientific intensity, while Mason babbled at a display of oranges. Both children were beautiful, with Keisha's warm brown skin and delicate features, but those eyes belonged to the woman who had raised Christopher. The woman who had loved him unconditionally. The woman whose death had broken something fundamental inside him. How old? The question escaped before he could stop it. 2 years and 3 months. Keisha didn't need to do the math for him. The timing was unmistakable. A woman with a cart full of organic kale squeezed past them, muttering about people blocking the aisle. The interruption snapped Christopher back to awareness of where they were, surrounded by Saturday afternoon shoppers who might recognize him. We need to talk. His voice was low, urgent. No, we don't. Keisha moved to push her cart away, but Tyler chose that moment to have a meltdown. His teething pain combined with overstimulation exploded into wails that echoed through the produce section. Mama! Hurt! Hurt! He reached for her desperately. Christopher watched, transfixed, as Keisha lifted Tyler from the cart with practiced ease, settling him against her hip while simultaneously preventing Mason from climbing out after his brother. The logistics of managing 2 toddlers alone were clearly second nature to her. Shoo! Baby! I know it hurts. She kissed Tyler's forehead, her voice infinitely gentle despite her obvious exhaustion. We'll go home and get your medicine. Tyler's cries subsided to sniffles, but he stayed plastered against his mother like a barnacle. Mason, not to be outdone, began his own attention-seeking whimpers. Christopher found himself reaching toward Mason instinctively, then catching himself. The boy looked so small, so in need of comfort. When had Christopher ever comforted anyone? Here. The word came out rougher than intended. Let me help. Keisha's eyes flashed with something between surprise and suspicion. We're fine. But they clearly weren't fine. Tyler was growing heavier in her arms. Mason was escalating toward a full tantrum, and other shoppers were starting to stare. Christopher had created this situation through his abandonment, and now he was watching her struggle alone with the consequences. Please. The word felt foreign on his tongue. Just let me help get them to your car. Keisha studied his face, weighing options. Pride warred with exhaustion, and exhaustion won. Fine. But then we're done. Christopher awkwardly took Mason from the cart. The toddler immediately stopped fussing, fascinated by this new face at his eye level. Up close, the resemblance was even more startling. Not just the eyes, but the shape of his nose, the stubborn set of his jaw. This child was undeniably his son. The knowledge hit him like a physical blow. They made an odd procession through the checkout line. Keisha bouncing a teething Tyler while juggling her wallet and grocery items. Christopher holding Mason with the careful uncertainty of someone who'd never held a child before. The toddler seemed perfectly content in his arms, even reaching up to touch Christopher's face with sticky fingers. Dada, Mason said experimentally. Christopher's breath caught. Keisha's jaw tightened. No, baby. That's just a man helping Mama. Her voice was carefully neutral, but Christopher heard the steel underneath. The checkout clerk, a teenager with purple hair and multiple piercings, barely looked up from scanning items. Cute kids. They look just like their dad." The comment hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Christopher paid for Keisha's groceries before she could protest, his Black American Express card making the transaction swift and expensive. Outside, the June heat hit them like a wall. Dallas summers were brutal, and Keisha's 10-year-old Camry sat baking in the sun without the mercy of covered parking. "Which car?" Christopher asked, still holding Mason. Keisha pointed to her car with obvious embarrassment. The contrast between her dented sedan and his Mercedes parked 3 spaces away was a visual reminder of the different worlds they inhabited. Christopher helped load the twins into their car seats, his hands clumsy with the unfamiliar buckles and straps. Both boys accepted his help with the easy trust that only children possessed, Mason even giving him a drooly smile. "Thank you." Keisha's words were polite but distant. "We can manage from here." "Keisha, wait." Christopher stepped closer, close enough to catch the familiar scent of her vanilla perfume mixed with baby shampoo and exhaustion. "We really do need to talk." "About what?" "You made your position very clear 2 years ago." "Things change." "Do they?" Her dark eyes held no warmth. "Because from where I'm standing, you look exactly the same. Rich, powerful, surrounded by everything money can buy. The only thing that's changed is now you've seen what you threw away." Tyler had fallen asleep in his car seat, finally succumbing to teething exhaustion. Mason was fighting sleep, his eyelids drooping as he clutched a small stuffed elephant. Christopher stared at his sons, these beautiful children he'd denied existed. "They have her eyes." "Whose eyes?" "My grandmother's." "Eleanor." His voice cracked slightly. "They're exactly the same." Keisha's expression softened marginally. "I know. I see it too. She would have loved them." Yes, she would have. If she'd been allowed to meet them. The accusation stung because it was true. Eleanor Kane would have embraced these great-grandchildren, would have spoiled them with love and cookies and bedtime stories. Instead, she died never knowing they existed because Christopher had been too proud and too afraid to admit the truth. "Keisha, He struggled for words that had never come easily. "I was wrong. About everything. Wrong doesn't give me back 2 years of raising them alone. Wrong doesn't pay for the nights I worked 3 jobs while pregnant because someone destroyed my career. Wrong doesn't explain to a 2-year-old why other kids have daddies and he doesn't." Each word was a knife, precise and devastating. Christopher realized he'd underestimated the damage his denial had caused. He'd thought firing her was the end of it, but for Keisha, it had been just the beginning of a struggle he couldn't imagine. "Let me make it right." "How?" "By throwing money at the problem? That's your solution to everything, isn't it?" Keisha opened her car door, the heat from inside wafting out like an oven. "Some things can't be bought, Christopher. Trust, respect, time." She started to get in the car, but Christopher caught her arm gently. "Please. One conversation. That's all I'm asking." "Why now? Why today?" Christopher looked at the sleeping twins, at the evidence of his cowardice and denial made flesh. "Because I've been lying to myself for 2 years, and I can't do it anymore. Because they deserve better than a father who pretends they don't exist." Sometimes the timing of regret doesn't match the timing of readiness to forgive. Keisha studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her of his sincerity, because she sighed deeply. "Patricia's Diner on Jefferson Boulevard. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. 1 hour. Christopher. That's all you get. Thank you." She drove away without another word, leaving Christopher standing in the parking lot surrounded by the ghosts of 2 lost years. The Mercedes felt empty as he drove home, the silence oppressive after the brief chaos of crying children and scattered goldfish crackers. In his penthouse that evening, Christopher stood at his bedroom window holding his grandmother's photograph. Eleanor's blue-green eyes seemed to stare right through him, seeing everything he'd tried to hide from himself. When love comes into your life, don't run from it. He'd run so far and so fast that love had grown up without him. Two beautiful boys who carried her eyes and his stubborn chin, raised by a woman whose strength put his wealth to shame. Tomorrow he would face the conversation he'd been avoiding for 2 years. Tomorrow he would have to find words for guilt that threatened to drown him. Tonight, he could only hold his grandmother's picture and wonder if it was too late to become the man she'd always believed he could be. Across town, Keisha tucked Tyler and Mason into their shared crib, watching their faces relax into the perfect peace that only sleeping children possessed. They looked like angels, all dark curls and long eyelashes and those remarkable eyes that held so much of the man who'd never held them. "What do you think, babies?" she whispered. "Should Mama give your daddy another chance?" Neither boy answered, but somewhere in her heart, she thought she heard Eleanor Kane's voice whispering back, "Love finds a way, child. Love always finds a way." Patricia's diner sat on Jefferson Boulevard like a time capsule from the 1950s, complete with red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and a neon sign that flickered between open and ope. The Sunday lunch crowd had thinned, leaving mostly coffee drinkers and pie enthusiasts scattered throughout the restaurant. Keisha chose a corner booth with a clear view of both entrances. Old habits from 2 years of looking over her shoulder, wondering if Christopher's investigators were still watching her movements. She'd left the twins with Patricia, who'd given her a fierce hug and whispered, "Don't let him bulldoze you, honey. You hold all the cards now." Christopher arrived exactly at 2, scanning the diner with obvious discomfort. He looked out of place among the working-class families and elderly couples, his expensive clothes and perfectly styled hair marking him as foreign territory. When he spotted Keisha, relief flashed across his face. "Thank you for coming." He slid into the booth across from her, his large frame barely fitting in the cramped space. "1 hour," Keisha reminded him. "Say what you need to say." A waitress appeared with coffee-stained menus and a tired smile. "What can I get y'all?" "Just coffee," Christopher said. "Make it 2. Keisha wasn't hungry. Her stomach was too twisted with nerves and old anger. When they were alone, Christopher stared into his coffee cup as if it held answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Keisha broke it. "You wanted to talk. So talk. I don't know where to start. Try the beginning. Like why you thought it was acceptable to deny your own children." Christopher winced. "Because I was terrified." "Of what?" "Child support. Bad publicity." "Of being my father." The words hung between them like a confession. Keisha hadn't expected honesty, especially not the raw kind that made Christopher's voice crack. "Tell me about your father." Her voice was softer now, curiosity replacing some of the anger. Christopher's hands wrapped around the coffee mug like it was an anchor. "Daniel Kane. Successful businessman, at least on paper. Charming when he wanted something, cruel when he didn't get it." He looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time. "He walked out on my mother and me when I was 7. Said he couldn't be tied down to that kind of responsibility." The phrase hit Keisha like an echo. Similar words to what Christopher had said to her that terrible night. "What happened after he left?" "My mother tried to hold everything together, but she was already sick. Lupus, though we didn't know it then. She just kept getting weaker, more tired. We lost the house, moved in with my grandmother Eleanor." Christopher's voice grew quieter. "Mom died when I was 12. Kidney failure." Keisha felt her anger softening despite herself. The image of a 12-year-old boy losing his mother, abandoned by his father, raised by his grandmother, added context to the cold man who'd rejected her pregnancy. "Eleanor raised you alone? She was everything. Mother, father, best friend, moral compass." Christopher's eyes grew distant. "She worked double shifts at the hospital to pay for my clothes, my school supplies, everything. Never complained, never made me feel like a burden, even though I'm sure I was." "You weren't a burden, Christopher. You were her family." He looked surprised by her gentle tone. She used to tell me that family was the only thing that mattered, that money and success were empty without people to share them with. Smart woman. I didn't listen. Christopher's laugh was bitter. I was so determined not to be poor again, not to be dependent on anyone, that I forgot everything else she taught me. After she died, I told myself I didn't need family, didn't want the complications, the vulnerability. The waitress refilled their coffee cups, sensing the heavy conversation and leaving quickly. Christopher waited until she was gone before continuing. When you told me about the pregnancy, all I could think about was my father. How he'd looked at me like I was a trap, a burden that would ruin his life. I panicked and became exactly what I hated most. Keisha studied his face, seeing pain she'd never noticed before. That night, when you fired me, you said such cruel things. I know. Christopher's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. About you being ordinary, about stooping low. Keisha, those weren't my words. They were his. My father's voice coming out of my mouth, and I hated myself even as I said them. Then why didn't you stop? Because I was a coward. Because admitting you were pregnant meant admitting I cared about you, and caring meant risking the kind of pain I felt when my parents left. Christopher's hands shook slightly as he reached across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. I thought if I pushed you away first, it wouldn't hurt when you inevitably left. I wasn't going to leave, Christopher. I was going to stay and raise our child together. I know that now. I've known it for 2 years, but I was too proud to admit it. Keisha pulled her hands back, crossing her arms defensively. Do you have any idea what your denial cost me? What it cost Tyler and Mason? Christopher's face crumpled. Tell me, please. I need to know. The request surprised her. She'd expected justifications, excuses, legal maneuvering. Not this raw desire for truth. I worked until I was 8 months pregnant. 3 jobs, sometimes 4 when I could find weekend catering work. I was on my feet 14 hours a day, cleaning offices, watching other people's children, serving food at events where the flowers cost more than my monthly rent. Christopher's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. The boys came early. 5 weeks. I was cleaning the Henderson law firm building when my water broke at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. I called 911 myself, drove myself to the hospital, delivered them alone while you were probably at some charity gala pretending to care about helping families. Keisha. I'm not finished. Her voice grew stronger, fueled by 2 years of suppressed anger. They were so small, Christopher. 2 pounds each, in the NICU for 6 weeks. I sat by their isolates every night after work, pumping breast milk and praying they'd survive, while you lived in your tower pretending we didn't exist. Tears ran down Christopher's face now, but Keisha continued relentlessly. Do you want to know the worst part? The absolute worst part of all of this. He nodded, not trusting his voice. When they were born, when I first saw their faces, they looked exactly like you. Your eyes, your chin, your stubborn expressions. And my first thought wasn't joy or relief that they were alive. Keisha's voice broke. My first thought was fear that everyone would see the resemblance and know what you denied. That my beautiful babies would carry the shame of being rejected by their own father. Christopher covered his face with his hands. I'm sorry. God, Keisha, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back 2 years of sleepless nights. Sorry doesn't explain why Tyler asks why other kids have daddies at pickup time. Sorry doesn't pay for the formula and diapers and medical bills I've struggled with alone. They sat in silence for several minutes, Christopher crying openly while Keisha watched him with a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. She'd wanted him to understand, to feel even a fraction of the pain his abandonment had caused. Finally, he looked up with red-rimmed eyes. What can I do? How can I make this right? I don't know if you can. Please. There has to be something. Some way to fix this. Keisha leaned back in the booth, studying his face. The man across from her looked nothing like the cold, cruel person who'd fired her 2 years ago. This Christopher was broken open, vulnerable, desperate for redemption. "Why now?" she asked quietly. "What changed?" "Seeing them yesterday. Tyler and Mason. They have Eleanor's eyes. Keisha. Exactly the same blue-green, the same shape, the same expression when they're curious about something." "I know. I've always known. She died 6 months before you told me about the pregnancy. I was lost without her, drowning in grief, and instead of letting you help me heal, I used my pain as an excuse to cause more pain." Christopher pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos until he found what he was looking for. He turned the screen toward Keisha, showing a picture of a woman in her 70s with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "This is Eleanor at my college graduation. Look at her eyes." Keisha took the phone, studying the photograph. The resemblance was remarkable. Not just the distinctive blue-green color, but the shape, the warmth, the intelligence that seemed to shine through the image. "She's beautiful. She would have loved them so much. Would have spoiled them rotten with cookies and bedtime stories and unconditional acceptance." Christopher's voice was thick with regret. "I robbed her of the chance to meet her great-grandchildren, and I robbed them of the chance to know her through me. Tell me about her. What was she like?" Christopher's face softened as he spoke. "She was a nurse at Presbyterian Hospital for 40 years. Worked night shifts so she could be home when I got out of school. She taught me to cook, helped me with homework, showed up to every baseball game and school play even when she was exhausted." "She sounds wonderful." She was. And she was so excited about the idea of grandchildren someday. Used to tease me about finding a nice girl and settling down, giving her babies to spoil. Christopher laughed through his tears. "She had this rocking chair in her living room, said it was waiting for the day she could rock her great-grandbabies to sleep." The image was heartbreaking. Keisha imagined Eleanor Kane in a hospital bed, dreaming of children she would never meet, while Christopher pushed away the very family she'd longed for. Sometimes our worst mistakes hurt not just those we can see, but those we can't even imagine. "What would she say to you right now?" Keisha asked. "If Eleanor could see you sitting here, knowing what you've done?" Christopher closed his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of imagined conversations held in sleepless nights. "She'd be disappointed, but she'd also say it's never too late to do the right thing." Eleanor believed in second chances, third chances, as many chances as it took for love to win. He opened his eyes, looking directly at Keisha. "She'd tell me to stop being afraid and start being a father." "And what does that look like to you? Being a father?" "I don't know. I have no idea how to be a good father. My only model was a man who abandoned his responsibilities." Christopher's honesty was painful but necessary. "But I want to learn. I want to try." "Trying isn't enough, Christopher. Children need consistency, reliability, love. They need someone who shows up, not someone who tries when it's convenient." "Then teach me. Help me learn how to be what they need." Keisha shook her head. "That's not my job. I've been both mother and father to them for 2 years. I can't teach you to love them too. I already love them." The words came out in a rush. Yesterday, when Mason called me Dada, when Tyler fell asleep in the car, I felt something I've never felt before. This fierce, protective, overwhelming feeling that I'd die before letting anything hurt them. That's what I felt every day for 2 years while you pretended they didn't exist. The accusation hung heavy between them. Christopher nodded, accepting the hit. "You're right. I have no right to their love, no right to ask for a place in their lives. But Keisha, I'm asking anyway, not because I deserve it, but because they deserve to know their father. And maybe, if I work hard enough, I can become worthy of being their dad." Keisha stood up, throwing $5 on the table. "1 hour is up." "Wait, please. What happens now?" She looked down at him, this powerful man reduced to begging in a diner booth. I don't know, Christopher. I need time to think. How much time? As much as I need. She started toward the door, then turned back. But, Christopher, if you're serious about wanting to be their father, you need to understand something. It's not about you anymore. It's about them. And if you hurt them the way you hurt me, there won't be another chance. Christopher watched her walk away, leaving him alone with his coffee and his regrets. Outside the diner windows, Dallas traffic moved in familiar patterns, but inside his chest, everything had changed. For the first time in 2 years, he allowed himself to hope that love might be stronger than fear, that redemption might be possible, and that somewhere in the mess he'd made, there might be a path back to the family he'd thrown away. The photograph of Eleanor still glowed on his phone screen, her blue-green eyes seeming to whisper the word she'd said so many times. Love finds a way, Christopher. Love always finds a way. The playground at Clyde Warren Park buzzed with weekend energy. Children raced across colorful equipment while parents clutched coffee cups and chased after runaway toddlers. Keisha sat on a bench watching Tyler and Mason navigate the toddler climbing structure with the fearless determination that only 2-year-olds possessed. Her phone had been silent for 6 days since the diner conversation. She'd expected Christopher to call, to push, to use his resources to force another meeting. The silence was somehow more unsettling than pressure would have been. Mama, look! Tyler pointed at a butterfly that had landed on the slide. Pretty! Very pretty, baby. Mason attempted to catch the butterfly, his chubby hands grasping at air as it fluttered away. Both boys had inherited their father's persistence, along with their great-grandmother's eyes. Excuse me. The familiar voice made her turn. Christopher stood at the edge of the playground, looking uncertain in khaki shorts and a white polo shirt. Casual clothes that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget, but casual nonetheless. What are you doing here? I come here sometimes. To think. He gestured toward the bench beside her. May I? Keisha nodded, curious despite herself. You come to a children's playground to think? Eleanor used to bring me here when I was young. Well, not here exactly, but the old playground that used to be downtown before they built this park. Christopher sat carefully, maintaining distance between them. She said watching children play reminded her why everything else mattered. Tyler noticed the newcomer and abandoned the climbing structure, running over with his characteristic toddle sprint. Hi! Hi there! Christopher's voice was gentler than Keisha had ever heard it. Are you having fun? Slide! Tyler pointed enthusiastically at the equipment. Big slide! That does look like a very big slide. Mason appeared at his brother's side, studying Christopher with serious concentration. Both boys seemed to remember him from the grocery store, showing none of the stranger shyness they usually exhibited. Would you like to try the swings? Christopher asked, surprising everyone including himself. The twins looked to their mother for permission. Keisha hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Then we need to go home for lunch. Christopher's face lit up like she'd given him the greatest gift imaginable. He stood carefully, and both boys immediately reached for his hands with a trusting confidence that made Keisha's heart ache. She watched from the bench as he helped them into the toddler swings, his large hands fumbling with the safety chains. Tyler giggled with each gentle push, while Mason demanded, higher, higher, with increasing volume. Not too high, Keisha called out, but she was smiling despite herself. Christopher caught her expression and grinned back, and for a moment, she glimpsed the man she'd fallen for that night 2 years ago. The one who'd held her like she was precious, who'd whispered her name like a prayer. Daddy push? Mason asked, making both adults freeze. I'm just a friend, Christopher said carefully, his voice thick with emotion. Friend push, Tyler declared, apparently satisfied with the explanation. After the swings, Christopher helped them navigate the climbing structure, spotting Tyler as he attempted the big kid ladder while Mason conquered a smaller climbing wall. His movements were awkward but attentive, like a man learning a new language through immersion. "They're incredible," he said when they returned to the bench, both boys immediately climbing onto their mother's lap for post-playground snuggles. "They are." Keisha smoothed Tyler's sweaty curls while Mason dozed against her shoulder. "They're also exhausting, demanding, and completely unpredictable." Do they ask about their father?" The question was quiet, hesitant. Keisha considered lying, protecting him from the truth, then decided honesty was the only path forward. "Tyler does." Mason's too young to really understand, but Tyler sees other kids with dads and asks questions. She looked down at her son's peaceful face. "I tell him his daddy lives far away but loves him very much." Christopher's breath caught. "You tell him I love him?" "I tell him his daddy loves him. Whether that daddy is you or not remains to be seen." The distinction was clear and painful. Christopher nodded, accepting it. "What would it take," he asked, "for you to believe I could be their father?" "Time. Consistency. Proof that you're not going to disappear when things get hard." Keisha shifted Mason to a more comfortable position. "Children aren't a part-time commitment, Christopher. They need someone who shows up when they're sick, when they're scared, when they're being impossible toddlers who won't eat anything but goldfish crackers for 3 days straight." "Goldfish crackers?" She laughed despite the serious conversation. "You have no idea what you're in for." Christopher watched Tyler trace patterns on his mother's arm, the simple intimacy of the gesture revealing depths of love and connection he'd never experienced. "Will you let me try?" he asked. "Will you give me a chance to show up?" Keisha was quiet for several minutes, watching families around them navigate the complicated dance of parenthood. Fathers pushing strollers, mothers wiping sticky faces, siblings arguing over playground equipment. The messy, beautiful, exhausting reality of family life. "One chance," she said finally. "But we do this my way, at my pace. No lawyers, no pressure, no trying to buy your way into their hearts. Anything, whatever you need. I need you to understand that this isn't about what you want or what you think you deserve. This is about what's best for Tyler and Mason." Keisha's voice was firm. "They don't know you're their father yet. As far as they're concerned, you're a nice man who pushed them on swings. If you can't handle that, if you need immediate recognition or gratitude, then walk away now." Christopher felt the weight of her words, the challenge and the gift wrapped together. "I understand." "Do you?" "Because the first time you get frustrated, the first time they choose me over you, the first time being a parent is inconvenient or embarrassing or harder than you expected, you'll want to quit. And I won't let you break their hearts the way you broke mine." The honesty was brutal and necessary. Christopher looked at the sleeping child in her arms, at Tyler's trusting face, and felt the full magnitude of what he was asking for. "I won't quit," he said quietly. "I promise." "Don't promise me. Promise them." Keisha stood carefully, Mason still dozing against her shoulder. "And Christopher, promises to children are sacred. Break one, and you'll never get their trust back." 3 days later, the knock on Keisha's apartment door came at exactly 6 p.m. She'd been expecting it since their conversation at the park, but her heart still jumped when she looked through the peephole and saw Christopher standing in the hallway with a grocery bag and an uncertain expression. "Hi," he said when she opened the door. "I brought dinner. I hope that's okay." The twins rushed to the door, remembering their playground friend with enthusiasm. "Friend! Friend!" Tyler bounced on his toes. "Swing man!" Mason added helpfully. Christopher's face softened at their excitement. "Hi, Tyler." "Hi, Mason. I brought dinner for everyone." "What kind of dinner?" Keisha asked, suspicious of his sudden domestic gesture. "Nothing fancy. Rotisserie chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and..." He reached into the bag with theatrical mystery. "Goldfish crackers." Tyler and Mason cheered like he'd announced Christmas morning. "You remembered," Keisha said, surprised despite herself. "I pay attention." The apartment felt smaller with Christopher in it, his tall frame and commanding presence filling the modest living room. He looked around with genuine interest, taking in the second-hand furniture, children's toys scattered across the floor, and crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. "It's perfect," he said, and meant it. "It's small. It's a home. There's a difference." Dinner was a revelation for Christopher. He watched in fascination as Keisha cut Tyler's chicken into tiny pieces, negotiated with Mason over eating vegetables, and somehow managed to get food into both children despite their best efforts to paint the table with mashed potatoes. "Do they always eat like abstract artists?" he asked, wiping sweet potato from Mason's cheek. "This is actually pretty neat for them. You should see what happens with spaghetti." Tyler offered Christopher a goldfish cracker with sticky fingers. "Share." "Thank you." Christopher ate the cracker solemnly, as if it were a fine delicacy. "Delicious." Tyler giggled, clearly pleased with his generosity. After dinner, Christopher helped with the complicated bedtime routine. Bath time, where he learned that 2-year-olds could make water defy gravity. Teeth brushing, Tyler's favorite part, Mason's declared enemy, and the careful negotiation of pajamas over squirmy toddlers. "Story," Mason demanded, climbing onto the couch with a worn copy of Good Night Moon. "I'll read it," Keisha started, but Tyler had other ideas. "Friend, read." He thrust a different book at Christopher. "This one." Christopher found himself holding The Very Hungry Caterpillar, with 2 expectant faces staring at him. His public speaking skills, honed through years of board meetings and investor presentations, seemed inadequate for an audience of toddlers. On Monday, he ate through 1 apple, he began hesitantly. But he was still hungry. Tyler supplied enthusiastically, clearly knowing the story by heart. By the time the caterpillar became a butterfly, both boys were drowsy, leaning against Christopher's sides like bookends. The weight of their small bodies, the complete trust they showed in this virtual stranger, overwhelmed him with protective tenderness he'd never felt before. "Time for bed," Keisha announced, and the boys protested with sleepy whines. "Friend, tuck in," Mason asked hopefully. Christopher looked to Keisha for permission. She nodded, and he followed the bedtime procession to their small bedroom. 2 cribs side by side, stuffed animals and soft blankets creating cozy nests. "Night-night, Tyler." Christopher kissed the boy's forehead awkwardly, then did the same for Mason. "Sweet dreams." "Night-night, friend," they chorused sleepily. In the living room afterward, Christopher and Keisha cleaned up dinner dishes in comfortable silence. The domestic routine felt natural, like something they'd done 1,000 times before. "They're amazing," Christopher said, hanging up the dish towel. "They are, even when they're being tiny terrorists." "Do they get that from you or?" "Definitely from their father," Keisha said with a small smile. "Whoever he might be." Christopher laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd heard from him in 2 years. "Fair enough. Sometimes it's not grand gestures, but small moments of showing up consistently." They sat on her second-hand couch, the apartment quiet except for the distant sounds of Dallas traffic. Christopher looked around at the home she'd built for their children, seeing the love in every carefully chosen detail despite obvious financial constraints. "Keisha, I need you to know something." "What?" "Watching you with them tonight, seeing how you've raised them alone. You're an incredible mother. They're lucky to have you. They deserve more than luck. They deserve a father who wants to be here." "I want to be here." Christopher turned to face her fully. "Not because I feel obligated or guilty, but because sitting here tonight, reading them stories and tucking them in, I felt more like myself than I have in years." "This is the easy part, Christopher. Wait until Tyler has a tantrum in Target, or Mason refuses to nap for 3 days straight, or they're both sick with stomach flu and crying all night. Then let me be here for the hard parts too." Keisha studied his face, searching for signs of the cold, cruel man who'd fired her. She found only sincerity and a desperate hope that made her chest tight. "We'll see," she said finally. "One day at a time." Christopher nodded, understanding that patience would be his greatest challenge and his only path to redemption. As he prepared to leave, Tyler's sleepy voice called from the bedroom. "Friend, come back." "Tomorrow," Christopher called back, looking to Keisha for confirmation. "Tomorrow," she agreed. Standing at her door, Christopher felt the weight of possibility and terror in equal measure. "Thank you for tonight, for giving me a chance, for them. Don't thank me yet. We've got a long way to go." After he left, Keisha sat in the quiet apartment, surrounded by the evidence of an evening that had felt dangerously close to normal. She could still smell his cologne on the throw pillow where he'd sat, still hear Tyler and Mason's delighted giggles as they played with their new friend. For the first time in 2 years, she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to not do this alone. 3 weeks of dinners, playground visits, and bedtime stories had created a dangerous rhythm in Keisha's life. Christopher showed up consistently, learned to navigate toddler meltdowns with surprising patience, and somehow convinced Mason that vegetables weren't actually poison. Tyler had started watching for him through the window every evening at 6 p.m., announcing, "Friend coming," with pure joy. The routine felt too good to be true, which Keisha was about to discover it was. She was folding laundry when her phone rang. Rebecca Lane's name on the caller ID made her stomach drop. "Ms. Taylor? I think we need to have a conversation." "I have nothing to say to you." "Oh, but I have plenty to say to you." Rebecca's voice carried the sharp edge of someone holding all the cards. "I'm calling about Christopher's recent visits to your apartment." Keisha's blood ran cold. They were still watching her, still treating her like a threat to be managed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please. We have photographs, Ms. Taylor." Christopher entering your building at 6 p.m., leaving at 9 p.m., 3 nights a week for the past month. Playing with children at Clyde Warren Park. Very touching, really. The casual cruelty in Rebecca's voice made Keisha's hands shake. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand the situation you've created." Christopher's business partners are asking questions. His reputation is at stake. Kane Development is in the middle of a $200 million deal with investors who value discretion and traditional family values. Traditional family values? Keisha's voice rose. "Like abandoning your children? Like not having illegitimate children with the help become public knowledge?" Rebecca's words were surgical, designed to wound. Christopher's moment of weakness 2 years ago doesn't need to destroy his future. Or yours. Keisha sank onto her couch, Tyler's favorite book still open in her lap. "What are you really calling about?" "I'm calling to offer you a solution. A generous solution. $5 million, Ms. Taylor. Enough to disappear somewhere nice, raise those boys in comfort, give them everything money can buy." The number hit like a physical blow. $5 million. More money than Keisha could spend in a lifetime. College funds for the boys, a real house, security she'd never imagined. In exchange for what? Relocating. Quietly. Permanently. No contact with Christopher, no claims of paternity, no messy complications for anyone involved. "He knows about this call?" Rebecca's pause was telling. Christopher is emotionally compromised right now. He's not thinking clearly about what's best for his future. Someone has to. Someone like you. Someone who understands that fairy tales don't work in the real world. You're a smart woman, Ms. Taylor. You know this little domestic fantasy can't last. Christopher will get bored or frustrated, or his real world will demand his attention. And where will that leave you? Right back where you started, except now those boys will have tasted what it's like to have a father before losing him. The words hit every fear Keisha had been suppressing. Every doubt that crept in during quiet moments when Christopher's presence felt too good to be real. "He's been showing up," Keisha said weakly. "Every day like he promised. For 3 weeks. What about 3 months? 3 years? What happens when the novelty wears off and he remembers why successful men don't marry their housekeepers? Each question was a poison dart, aimed at the growing hope Keisha had been afraid to acknowledge. Think about those boys, Rebecca continued relentlessly. They're getting attached to him. What happens when he breaks their hearts the same way he broke yours? I need to think. Don't take too long. This offer expires Friday at noon. After that, we go back to the original plan of pretending you don't exist. The line went dead. Keisha sat staring at her phone, Rebecca's words echoing in her mind. $5 million. A new life somewhere far from Dallas, far from the man who'd rejected her pregnancy and was now playing house with the consequences. Tyler wandered over with his stuffed elephant, climbing onto her lap. Mama's sad. No, baby. Mama's just thinking. Friend coming tonight? The innocent question twisted her heart. I don't know, sweetheart. At 6 p.m., Christopher arrived with groceries and a new book about construction trucks. Tyler and Mason mobbed him with their usual enthusiasm, chattering about their day at Patricia's while he unpacked dinner ingredients. Keisha watched from the kitchen doorway, Rebecca's words playing on repeat. The novelty will wear off. He'll get bored. He'll break their hearts. Everything okay? Christopher noticed her silence while they prepared dinner together, the twins helping by scattering pasta across the floor. Fine. But she wasn't fine. Every smile he shared with the boys felt temporary. Every gentle interaction looked like borrowed time. When Mason fell asleep in Christopher's lap after dinner, Keisha found herself memorizing the scene, wondering if it would be the last. Keisha, what's wrong? Christopher's voice was concerned as they cleaned up after putting the boys to bed. You've been quiet all evening. She could have told him about Rebecca's call. Should have told him. But looking at his face, relaxed and happy in a way she'd never seen before, she couldn't bring herself to shatter the moment. Just tired. Are you sure? Because if something's bothering you. I said I'm fine. Christopher backed off, but confusion flickered in his gray eyes. The evening ended earlier than usual, both of them walking on eggshells around a tension neither wanted to name. Christopher arrived to find Keisha pacing the living room while Tyler and Mason watched cartoons, sensing their mother's agitation with the supernatural awareness of children. Mama worried, Tyler announced when Christopher walked in. About what? Christopher asked, setting down his usual grocery bag. I got a call yesterday, Keisha said without preamble. From Rebecca. Christopher went very still. What kind of call? The kind where she offered me $5 million to disappear with the boys. She what? Christopher's voice was deadly quiet. $5 million to relocate somewhere far away and never contact you again. She called it a generous solution to our messy complication. Christopher's face cycled through shock, rage, and something that looked like panic. Keisha, I had no idea. I never authorized. Didn't you? The words came out sharper than intended. Your lawyer offers me money to disappear, and I'm supposed to believe you knew nothing about it. I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know. Like you didn't know she was threatening me 2 years ago? Like you didn't know she had me investigated. Christopher ran his hands through his hair, the careful composure he'd maintained for weeks cracking apart. That was different. That was before. Before what? Before you decided playing house with your bastard children might be fun for a while. Don't call them that. Christopher's voice turned sharp. And don't act like the last 3 weeks meant nothing. What did they mean, Christopher? Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a guilty man trying to ease his conscience by playing daddy until the real world intrudes. Tyler and Mason had gone silent, sensing the adult tension with the instinctive fear of children who'd learned that raised voices meant their security was threatened. This is the real world, Christopher said desperately. This right here with you and them. This is what matters. For how long? Until your business partners start asking uncomfortable questions? Until being associated with me becomes inconvenient for your reputation. That's not what this is about. Isn't it? Keisha's voice cracked with 2 years of suppressed pain. Your lawyer thinks I'm a problem to be solved with money. She thinks you're emotionally compromised and not thinking clearly. She's probably right. Rebecca doesn't speak for me, doesn't she? Because 2 years ago, she was your voice when you wanted to erase me completely. What makes this different? Christopher opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. The question hung between them like a challenge he couldn't meet. Mama! Tyler's small voice cut through the tension. Why yelling? Keisha knelt down, pulling both boys close. We're not yelling, baby. We're just talking. Loud talking, Mason observed with 2-year-old honesty. Christopher watched the intimate tableau, his heart breaking at the fear in his sons' faces. Fear he'd caused by letting his old life contaminate this fragile new reality. I'll fire Rebecca, he said suddenly. Tonight. She had no right to contact you. And then what? Hire another lawyer who'll do the same thing more subtly? Christopher, your whole world sees me as a threat, as something to be managed. You can't fire everyone. I can try. Why? Why would you burn down your life for us? The question was simple and devastating. Christopher stared at her, at the boys clinging to their mother, at the family he'd already lost once through his own cowardice. Because I love you, he said quietly. All of you. More than any deal, any reputation, any amount of money. The words hung in the air like a confession. Keisha's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Love isn't enough, Christopher. Love doesn't change the fact that I'll never fit in your world. That Tyler and Mason will always be reminders of your moment of weakness with the help. That's not how I see you. It's how everyone else sees me. And eventually, that's going to matter more than whatever you think you feel right now. Christopher stepped closer, his voice urgent. What do you want me to say? That I don't care what people think? I don't. What do you want me to do? I'll do anything. I want you to be honest. With yourself, with me, with them. Keisha looked down at Tyler and Mason, still pressed against her legs. Can you really see yourself explaining to your business partners that you have 2 black sons with your former housekeeper? Can you handle the whispers at country club dinners and charity galas? Can you introduce us to your world without flinching? The silence that followed was answer enough. Sometimes love isn't about what we feel in private moments, but what we're willing to claim in public. When the world demands we choose between love and reputation, which matters more? I thought so, Keisha said softly. Christopher, you're a good man trying to do the right thing. But you can't love us in secret forever. And I won't raise my sons to be anyone's shame. They're not my shame. You're not my shame. Then prove it. Tomorrow night, Kane Development is hosting that charity auction at the Hilton Anatole. Take us with you. Let your world see who you really are. Christopher's face went pale. The charity auction was the social event of the summer, attended by Dallas's elite. Oil executives, tech moguls, politicians, society wives who controlled the city's charitable giving. The thought of walking into that ballroom with Keisha and the twins made his stomach turn to acid. Keisha, it's not the right setting for. For what? For your family. It's complicated. No, Christopher. It's simple. Either we're your family, or we're your secret. Either you're proud of us, or you're ashamed. There's no middle ground. Tyler tugged on Christopher's pants leg. Friend sad. Christopher knelt down, looking into those blue-green eyes that mirrored his grandmother's. Yeah, buddy. Friend is sad. Hug make better? Tyler opened his arms with the generous heart of a child who'd never learned that love could be conditional. Christopher pulled both boys close, memorizing their weight against his chest, the sweet smell of their shampoo, the absolute trust in their small faces. When he looked up, Keisha was watching with tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't," he whispered. "I'm not strong enough. Then we're done." Her voice was steady despite the tears. "All of us. Because they deserve better than a father who's ashamed to claim them." Christopher stood slowly, releasing the boys who clung to his legs with confused whimpers. "Please don't do this. There has to be another way." "There is. Take us to that auction. Show Dallas that Christopher Kane isn't ashamed of his family." "And if I can't?" "Then take Rebecca's advice. Go back to your tower and pretend we don't exist. But don't come back here, Christopher. Don't play with their hearts anymore." He walked to the door on unsteady legs, turning back one last time to see Tyler and Mason reaching for him with tear-filled eyes. "Daddy," Tyler said clearly, the word hitting like a physical blow. "Daddy, come back." Christopher's composure shattered completely. He ran from the apartment, from the family that could have been his salvation, from the love that terrified him more than any business deal or financial loss. Behind him, Tyler and Mason cried for the daddy who'd finally claimed them just long enough to break their hearts. Keisha held her sobbing children, her own tears falling silently as she realized that some fears were stronger than love, some walls too high to climb. The fairy tale was over before it had really begun. Christopher sat in his penthouse office, staring at the resignation letter he'd typed and retyped 17 times. Each version felt inadequate, too formal for what he was actually resigning from. The chance to be a father, the possibility of love, the family he'd walked away from less than 12 hours ago. His phone buzzed constantly. Rebecca calling about the charity auction tonight, business partners confirming dinner plans, his assistant reminding him about tomorrow's board meeting. The machinery of his carefully constructed life grinding forward while his heart lay in pieces 43 floors below the clouds. Tyler's voice echoed in his memory. "Daddy, come back?" The word had sliced through him like a blade. Daddy. Not friend, not the nice man who read stories. Daddy. As if somehow, in 3 weeks of dinners and bedtime routines, those beautiful boys had claimed him completely. And he'd run. Christopher walked to his bedroom, where Eleanor's photograph sat in its silver frame. Her blue-green eyes, so identical to her great-grandson's, seemed to hold infinite disappointment. When love comes into your life, don't run from it. He'd broken the most important promise he'd ever made. His laptop chimed with an email notification. Rebecca, confirming his attendance at tonight's auction and mentioning that the situation with Ms. Taylor has been resolved according to our discussion. Except they'd had no discussion. Christopher had never authorized any offer, any payment, any solution beyond his desperate hope that time and consistency might heal what he'd broken. Christopher picked up his phone and dialed. "Rebecca? We need to talk." Meanwhile, Oak Cliff apartment complex. Keisha had been awake all night, listening to Tyler and Mason toss restlessly in their cribs. They'd cried themselves to sleep asking for "daddy" and "friend," their toddler minds unable to understand why the man who'd become part of their routine had suddenly disappeared. Patricia knocked at 7 a.m. with coffee and grim determination. "Honey, you look like death." "Thanks. That's what I was going for." Keisha accepted the coffee gratefully. The twins were finally sleeping, exhausted from a night of confusion and tears. What happened? Keisha told her about Rebecca's call, the ultimatum she'd given Christopher, his inability to choose them over his reputation. Patricia listened without judgment, but her weathered face grew increasingly angry. "That fool man," she muttered when Keisha finished. "That absolute fool. Maybe Rebecca was right. Maybe I was living in a fantasy, thinking someone like Christopher could really want someone like me." "Someone like you?" Patricia's voice rose dangerously. "Keisha Taylor, you are one of the strongest, most loving women I've ever known. You've raised 2 beautiful boys alone, worked yourself to the bone to provide for them, and somehow kept your heart open enough to give that broken man a chance he didn't deserve. But not open enough to fit into his world. His world is the problem, not you. Any world that makes a man choose between love and acceptance is a world that needs changing. Keisha's phone rang. Unknown number. Ms. Taylor? This is Judge Raymond Foster's clerk. The judge would like to see you in his chambers this afternoon at 2 p.m. regarding a paternity matter. Keisha's blood went cold. I'm sorry, what paternity matter? Kane versus Taylor. Your attorney should have the details. I don't have an attorney. The clerk's pause was telling. I see. Well, the hearing is mandatory, ma'am. Family Court, Room 312, 2 p.m. sharp. The line went dead. Keisha stared at her phone, dread pooling in her stomach. What was that about? Patricia asked. I think Christopher just made his choice. Rebecca Lane sat across from Christopher's desk with a satisfied smile. Legal documents spread between them like evidence in a trial. The paternity hearing is scheduled for 2 p.m. Judge Foster is receptive to our arguments about Ms. Taylor's history of financial instability and questionable motives. What arguments? Christopher's voice was dangerously quiet. The usual. Gold-digging allegations, questions about her fitness as a mother, concerns about her ability to provide stable housing for the children. Rebecca's tone was clinical. We've documented her employment history, her living situation, her lack of family support beyond that elderly neighbor. You investigated Patricia too? Due diligence. The court needs to understand that these children would be better served in a stable, two-parent home with unlimited resources. Christopher felt sick. What two-parent home? Rebecca's smile widened. Yours, of course. With your fiancé. My what? Congratulations, by the way. The engagement announcement to Victoria Pemberton will run in tomorrow's society page. Oil heiress, impeccable breeding, perfect wife for Dallas's most eligible bachelor. Rebecca slid a photograph across the desk. A tall, blonde woman Christopher vaguely remembered from various charity functions. I'm not engaged to anyone. You are now. Victoria's family needs the business connection. You need a respectable wife, and those children need a proper mother figure. Everyone wins. Christopher stared at the photograph, his mind reeling. You can't just arrange my life like a business transaction. I can and I did. Christopher, you're not thinking clearly. This Taylor situation has clouded your judgment, but I'm here to protect your interests. My interests? Your reputation, your business relationships, your future. Do you really want to be known as the man who abandoned his empire for the help's bastard children? The words hit like physical blows. Christopher stood abruptly, his chair spinning backward. Get out. Excuse me. Get out of my office. You're fired. Rebecca's composure finally cracked. Christopher, you can't be serious. I've protected you for years, built your legal fortress, cleaned up every mess you've made. Including the mess where I denied my own children and destroyed the woman I love? You don't love her. You feel guilty about her. There's a difference. Christopher walked to his window, looking out at Dallas spread below him like a kingdom he'd built on the graves of everyone he'd ever hurt. Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't love her. But I love them. Tyler and Mason. My sons. The words felt like salvation and damnation combined. And they love her. Which means if I want to be their father, I have to find a way to deserve their mother. It's too late for that. The hearing is in 3 hours. Judge Foster expects to award custody to a stable married couple, not to some delusional fantasy about cross-class romance. Then I guess I better get married. Rebecca's face went white. To who? The only woman I've ever loved. The mother of my children. The woman you've spent 2 years trying to erase. Christopher grabbed his keys. Cancel the hearing, Rebecca. Or don't. Either way, you're done speaking for me. Christopher, wait. Think about what you're doing. But he was already gone, leaving Rebecca alone with her legal documents and her carefully constructed plans lying in ruins. Keisha sat on a bench outside courtroom 312, Patricia beside her for moral support. She'd managed to find a black dress that looked professional despite being from Target, and Patricia had watched the twins so Keisha could face whatever Christopher had planned. "You don't have to do this alone," Patricia said for the 10th time. "I called my nephew Jerome. He's a lawyer in Houston, says he can drive down and represent you. There's no time. And honestly, Patricia, what's the point? If Christopher wants to take the boys away from me, he has the resources to do it. That man loves those babies. I saw it with my own eyes. Love isn't enough." Rebecca was right about that much. Keisha checked the time. 25 minutes until her world potentially ended. Maybe they would be better off with him. Better schools, better opportunities, better everything. Better everything except a mother who loves them unconditionally. He could love them unconditionally too, if he wasn't ashamed of where they came from. A commotion in the hallway made them look up. Christopher was striding toward them, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. His hair was messy, his tie was crooked, and his gray eyes held a wild desperation she'd never seen before. "Keisha, thank God you're here. Where else would I be? Your lawyer called a mandatory hearing. I fired Rebecca. This morning. The hearing, the custody petition, all of it. I had no idea." Keisha stood slowly, studying his face for signs of deception. "You didn't know?" She took it upon herself to protect my interests. Apparently my interests included stealing my children and arranging my marriage to some oil heiress I've never had a conversation with. "Your marriage?" Christopher laughed bitterly. "Rebecca's master plan. Marry me off to Victoria Pemberton, award us custody of Tyler and Mason, create the perfect Dallas power family. Everyone wins except the people who actually matter. So why are you here?" "Because I made a choice." Finally, after 2 years of cowardice and 24 hours of hell, I made a choice. The courtroom doors opened, and a bailiff called, "Kane versus Taylor." "Wait." Christopher caught Keisha's arm as she started toward the courtroom. "Before we go in there, I need to say something. Sometimes the scariest choice is also the only one worth making." People streamed past them into the courtroom, but Christopher seemed oblivious to everything except Keisha's face. "I love you," he said simply. "I loved you 2 years ago when I was too scared to admit it. I loved you 3 weeks ago when I was too proud to deserve it. And I love you right now when I'm probably too late to matter." Keisha's breath caught. "Christopher. I love Tyler and Mason more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. I love their laugh, their curiosity, the way they trust completely and forgive instantly. I love that they have your heart and Eleanor's eyes and apparently my stubborn streak. Why are you telling me this now? Because in about 2 minutes, I'm going to walk into that courtroom and ask Judge Foster to throw out the custody petition. I'm going to tell him that those boys belong with their mother, the woman who's sacrificed everything to give them a good life." Keisha felt tears starting. "And then what?" "And then I'm going to ask you to marry me." The words hit like lightning. Keisha stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What did you say?" Christopher dropped to one knee right there in the courthouse hallway, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "Keisha Taylor, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you and Tyler and Mason? Will you help me become the man my grandmother always believed I could be?" The ring was beautiful but simple. A classic solitaire that sparkled under the fluorescent lights. Nothing ostentatious, nothing designed to impress strangers at charity auctions. "Christopher, I can't. Your world, your business, everything you've built means nothing without you. Less than nothing. I'd rather have one day as Tyler and Mason's father and your husband than a lifetime of empty success." "The Kane versus Taylor case," the bailiff called again, impatience clear in his voice. "Keisha, please. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking anyway. Not because I've earned it, but because love doesn't wait for us to be worthy. It just asks us to be brave enough to choose it." She looked down at him, this powerful man reduced to pleading on his knees in a courthouse hallway, and saw not the cold businessman who'd rejected her pregnancy or the conflicted man who'd played house for 3 weeks. She saw the father Tyler and Mason deserved, the partner she'd dreamed of during the loneliest nights. The man Eleanor Kane had raised to understand that love was the only thing that lasted after everything else was gone. "Ask me again," she whispered. "Will you marry me?" "Yes." The word came out as a sob. "Yes, Christopher. I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and kissed her in the middle of the courthouse hallway while lawyers and defendants and worried families swirled around them. Final call for Kane versus Taylor. They broke apart, Christopher's forehead resting against hers. Ready to face the world together? Ready. Hand in hand, they walked into courtroom 312 to face Judge Foster, Rebecca's custody petition, and the first day of the rest of their lives. The choice had finally been made. Love had won. Judge Raymond Foster was a man who'd seen every permutation of human drama play out in his courtroom over 30 years on the bench. Custody battles between bitter ex-spouses, grandparents fighting for visitation rights, children caught between parents who used them as weapons. But the case files spread across his desk presented something unusual. A billionaire real estate mogul seeking custody of twins he'd never legally acknowledged, represented by an attorney he'd apparently fired that morning. The children's mother, who'd raised them alone for 2 years, arriving without legal representation. And a custody petition that seemed designed more to punish than to protect. "This is highly irregular," Judge Foster began, looking over his reading glasses at the couple standing before his bench. "Mr. Kane, I understand you've dismissed your attorney?" "Yes, Your Honor. Rebecca Lane no longer represents me in any capacity." "And Ms. Taylor, you're representing yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Foster studied the paperwork again. According to the petition filed this morning, Mr. Kane was seeking full custody of the minor children Tyler Kane and Mason Kane, ages 2 years, 3 months. The grounds cited include questions about the mother's financial stability, housing situation, and fitness as a parent. Keisha felt her legs go weak. The boys' last names had been changed to Kane in the legal documents, as if Christopher had already claimed them. "However," Judge Foster continued, "I received a call from Mr. Kane's office 20 minutes ago requesting that all petitions be withdrawn. Mr. Kane, is this correct?" "It is, Your Honor. I want to withdraw the custody petition completely." "And why is that?" Christopher looked at Keisha, then back at the judge. "Because those children belong with their mother. She's raised them with more love and dedication than I thought possible. Any petition questioning her fitness as a parent is not only wrong, it's insulting." Judge Foster raised an eyebrow. "This is a rather dramatic change from this morning's filing." "Your Honor, the filing was made without my knowledge or consent by an attorney who exceeded her authority. I've spent 2 years making terrible decisions about my children. I'd like to start making better ones." "Your children." Judge Foster's tone sharpened. "Mr. Kane, are you claiming paternity of these minors?" "I am, Your Honor. Tyler Kane and Mason Kane are my sons. I should have acknowledged them from the beginning." The judge made notes, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Taylor, what is your position on Mr. Kane's claim of paternity?" Keisha's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "He is their father, Your Honor." "And how do you feel about his request to withdraw the custody petition?" "Relieved, Your Honor. Very relieved." Judge Foster leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "Mr. Kane, if you're withdrawing your custody petition, what exactly are you asking this court to do?" Christopher reached for Keisha's hand, their fingers intertwining as he spoke. "I'm asking the court to establish legal paternity and joint custody, Your Honor. I want to be responsible for my son's welfare, education, and medical care. I want to pay child support that reflects my ability to provide for them. And I want their mother to retain primary custody, because she's the best parent they could possibly have. Joint custody requires cooperation between parents. Given your complicated history, how do you propose to make this work? Keisha squeezed Christopher's hand and stepped forward. Your Honor, Mr. Kane and I are engaged to be married. Judge Foster's eyebrows shot up. As of when? As of about 5 minutes ago, Christopher said with the first smile he'd worn in court. I see. Judge Foster shuffled through his papers again. This is certainly an unusual case. Ms. Taylor, are you comfortable with joint custody arrangements? I am, Your Honor. I want Tyler and Mason to know their father. I want them to have the family they deserve. And Mr. Kane, you understand that joint custody means legal and financial responsibility for these children until they reach adulthood? I understand completely, Your Honor. It's what I should have accepted 2 years ago. Judge Foster was quiet for several minutes, reading through documents and making notes. Finally, he looked up. Very well. I'm ordering DNA testing to establish legal paternity, though it seems all parties are in agreement about the biological facts. Upon confirmation, I'll issue joint custody orders with primary physical custody to Ms. Taylor and full financial responsibility to Mr. Kane, including retroactive child support from the date of birth. Christopher felt a weight lift from his chest. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Kane. Custody orders are easy to sign. Being a father every day for the next 16 years is the hard part. Judge Foster's stern expression softened slightly. These children are fortunate to have a mother who fought for them. Don't make her fight alone anymore. I won't, Your Honor. I promise. 1 hour later, Patricia was waiting in the parking lot when Christopher's Mercedes pulled up next to Keisha's Camry. She'd been pacing for an hour, the twins napping inside her apartment while their world changed forever. Well, she demanded before they'd even gotten out of the cars. Keisha held up her left hand, the engagement ring catching the afternoon sunlight. We're getting married. Patricia hooped loud enough to wake half the complex, then pulled them both into a fierce hug. About damn time. Those boys have been asking for their daddy all day. Are they okay? Christopher asked, sudden anxiety replacing relief. Last night was difficult. They're resilient, like their mama. Come on, let's go wake up your sons. The word sons hit Christopher like a gift every time he heard it. His sons. Tyler and Mason Kane, legally and officially and forever. Inside Patricia's cluttered apartment, the twins were just stirring from their naps, hair mussed and cheeks flushed with sleep. Tyler spotted Christopher first and launched himself across the room. Daddy! Daddy back! Mason was right behind him, both boys wrapping themselves around Christopher's legs like tiny koalas. The word daddy came so naturally from their lips, as if they'd been waiting their whole lives to say it. I'm back, Christopher said, kneeling to gather them close. I'm never leaving again. Promise. Tyler asked with the serious expression he'd inherited from his father. I promise. Cross my heart. Mason noticed the ring on his mother's finger and examined it with scientific interest. Pretty. Very pretty, Keisha agreed, looking at Christopher over their sons' heads. Patricia wiped tears from her eyes. Lord have mercy, if Eleanor could see this. She can, Christopher said softly, looking at Tyler and Mason's blue-green eyes. I think she's been seeing it all along. 3 months later, the small ceremony took place in Patricia's backyard, transformed with white flowers and twinkling lights into something magical despite the modest setting. 20 guests sat in folding chairs borrowed from the community center, a mixture of Keisha's co-workers, neighbors, and Christopher's business associates who'd been shocked by his choice but smart enough to show respect. Tyler and Mason served as ring-bearers, toddling down the makeshift aisle in tiny navy suits that matched their fathers. They took their job seriously, even though Tyler tried to eat one of the rings and Mason got distracted by a butterfly halfway through the processional. Keisha wore a simple white dress from Nordstrom, nothing extravagant but beautiful in its elegance. Christopher had offered to buy her any designer gown she wanted, but she'd chosen something that felt like herself, not like someone she was pretending to be. Judge Foster officiated, having volunteered when he learned about their engagement. "Marriage is about choosing each other every day," he said, looking at the small gathered crowd. Christopher and Keisha have already proven they can choose love over fear, family over pride, and hope over hurt. Now they're making it official. When it came time for vows, Christopher spoke first, his voice carrying across the quiet backyard. "Keisha, 2 years ago I was the worst version of myself. Scared, selfish, too proud to admit I needed love more than I needed control." He looked down at Tyler and Mason, who were sitting in the front row with Patricia. "You raised our sons to be kind, curious, generous little boys who somehow still had room in their hearts for a father who didn't deserve them." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't give you back the 2 years I stole from us, but I can promise you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to show up, to choose our family over everything else, to love you in public and in private and in all the messy, beautiful moments in between." Keisha's vows were simpler but no less powerful. "Christopher, love isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. You've shown Tyler and Mason what it means to make mistakes and still be worthy of forgiveness. You've shown me what it means to be chosen every single day." She reached down and took both boys' hands. "Today, I'm not just marrying you. I'm marrying the idea that families can heal, that love can grow stronger after being broken, and that sometimes the best things come from the hardest journeys." When Judge Foster pronounced them husband and wife, Tyler and Mason cheered loudly, not entirely sure what was happening but certain it was good news. Christopher kissed his bride while their sons applauded, and Patricia sobbed happy tears into her handkerchief. 6 months later, the house in University Park was nothing like Christopher's sterile penthouse. It was warm, lived in, filled with the chaos and laughter that came with 2 energetic 3-year-olds. Toys scattered across hardwood floors, crayon drawings stuck to the refrigerator with alphabet magnets, the lingering smell of whatever Play-Doh creation had been attempted that morning. Christopher sat on the living room floor, helping Tyler and Mason build a tower from wooden blocks while Keisha cooked dinner in the kitchen. The domestic routine still felt like a miracle, even after months of practice. "Daddy, look." Mason held up a block with serious concentration. "Big one. Very big. That's going to make the tower super strong." Tyler, ever the engineer, was already planning the next level. "Need more blocks, Daddy. Tower go to sky." "To the sky, huh? That's pretty ambitious." Keisha appeared in the doorway, dish towel in hand, watching her husband and sons with the contentment that came from dreams finally made real. Christopher caught her looking and smiled. "What?" "Nothing. Just this. All of this." He stood, walking over to pull her into his arms. "Any regrets about marrying you?" "Never." She leaned into his embrace. "Though I could have done without the society page photographer at the grocery store yesterday." Christopher grimaced. The media attention had been intense at first. Dallas society fascinated by the billionaire who'd married his former housekeeper. But it was dying down now, replaced by newer scandals and fresher gossip. "I'm sorry about that." "Don't be. Let them take pictures. Let them write their articles. I'm proud to be your wife. Even when the headlines call you a gold digger? Especially then. Because we know the truth. This isn't about money. It's about love." The tower crashed in the living room, followed by delighted squeals from Tyler and Mason. They'd learned that destruction could be as fun as construction, a lesson their father was still absorbing in other areas of his life. "Besides," Keisha added with a grin, "if I was a gold digger, I would have taken that $5 million Rebecca offered me and disappeared to somewhere tropical." Christopher laughed, spinning her around the kitchen. "My practical wife. What does it mean to choose love over fear? Sometimes it means risking everything you've built for something you've never had. Sometimes it means believing that broken things can be made whole again. Do you think Christopher and Keisha made the right choice? Share your story of choosing love in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what really matters. That evening, after dinner and bath time and the elaborate bedtime routine that involved 3 stories, 2 songs, and endless negotiations about which stuffed animals were essential for sleep, Christopher and Keisha sat on their back porch swing watching the Dallas sky fade from pink to purple. "I got a call from Angela today," Keisha said, referring to her old co-worker from the elementary school. "The principal position at Henderson Elementary is opening up. She thinks I should apply. Do you want to?" Keisha had been working part-time as a curriculum consultant since their marriage, using her education degree for the first time in years. The work was fulfilling in ways she'd forgotten were possible. "I think I do. It would mean going back to school for my master's degree, probably a few years of evening classes." "Then do it. I'll handle bedtime duty." "You say that now, but wait until Tyler discovers he can negotiate with you about toothbrushing. I've handled billion-dollar real estate deals. How hard can bedtime negotiations be?" Keisha laughed. "Oh, honey, you have no idea." They swung in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of suburban evening. Somewhere inside the house, Tyler and Mason slept peacefully in their shared bedroom, surrounded by the security of parents who chose each other every day. Christopher thought about Eleanor's photograph, now displayed prominently on the mantel next to pictures of the boys' first steps, first birthdays, first everything he'd almost missed. Sometimes he caught Tyler or Mason staring at her picture with the same curious intensity they brought to everything new, and he told them stories about their great-grandmother who would have loved them beyond measure. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. "It's not my birthday. It's not supposed to be for birthdays." Keisha unwrapped the gift carefully, revealing a small silver locket. Inside was a picture of Tyler and Mason on their first day at their new preschool, gap-toothed grins and lunch boxes bigger than they were. "Christopher, it's beautiful. Look at the back." Engraved in script were Eleanor's words, "Love finds a way." "She was right, wasn't she?" Keisha said, fastening the locket around her neck. "Love did find a way. Eventually, despite my best efforts to sabotage it." "Hey!" Keisha turned in the swing to face him fully. "No more looking backward. We're here now, all of us. That's what matters." Christopher nodded, but something in his expression made her study his face more carefully. "What is it?" "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For something to go wrong, for you to realize you made a mistake, for the boys to decide they don't want me around." "Christopher Kane, look at me." Keisha's voice was firm. "You are Tyler and Mason's father. Not because of DNA or legal documents or custody agreements. Because you show up every day. Because you read them stories even when you're exhausted from work. Because you know that Tyler likes his sandwiches cut diagonally and Mason won't eat anything green unless it's mixed with something else first. I just don't want to mess this up." "Then don't. It's really that simple." She kissed him softly. "Choose us. Every day, choose us. That's all we need." From inside the house came the sound of little feet on hardwood floors. Tyler appeared at the back door in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mama. Daddy. I had scary dream." Christopher was on his feet immediately, scooping his son into his arms. "It's okay, buddy. Daddy's here." Tyler settled against his father's chest with the complete trust that still amazed Christopher every time he experienced it. "Tell scary dream go away?" "The scary dream is gone. You know why." "Why?" "Because Mama and Daddy are here, and we're never going to let anything hurt you. You and Mason are safe, always." "Promise. Promise." Tyler yawned, already drifting back towards sleep. "Love you, Daddy." "I love you too, son. More than all the stars in the sky." As Christopher carried Tyler back to bed, with Keisha following close behind, he realized that the fear of losing this family had been replaced by something stronger. The certainty that love, once chosen fully and completely, created its own security. In the boys' bedroom, Mason was still sleeping peacefully, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant Christopher had bought him during their first shopping trip together. Tyler settled back into his bed without fully waking, murmuring something about dinosaurs and ice cream that made his parents smile. Standing in the doorway of their son's room, Christopher and Keisha watched the gentle rise and fall of their children's breathing, the peaceful expressions that spoke of absolute trust in the adults who protected them. 2 years ago, Christopher had stood in his empty penthouse, convinced that wealth and power were enough to fill the holes in his heart. Now he knew better. Love filled those holes. Family filled them. The daily choice to show up, to be present, to put these 3 people ahead of everything else in his carefully ordered world. No regrets, Keisha whispered. Christopher looked at his sleeping sons, at his wife's face soft with contentment, at the life they'd built from the ashes of his worst mistakes. None, he said. Not a single one. Outside their window, Dallas sparkled with the lights of 8 million people pursuing their own versions of happiness. But inside this house, in this moment, happiness had already been found. It lived in bedtime stories and grocery store tantrums, in small hands that reached for him with perfect trust, in a woman's love that had proven stronger than his fear. Love had found its way home. 2 years later, the conference room at Kane Development buzzed with the energy of a company that had just closed its most profitable year in history. Christopher sat at the head of the mahogany table, flanked by his new legal team and senior partners, reviewing quarterly reports that showed unprecedented growth. The University Park Development Project brought in $42 million, reported Janet Mills, his new chief operating officer. And the Affordable Housing Initiative in Oak Cliff is not only profitable, it's won 3 community development awards. Christopher smiled. After marrying Keisha, he'd pivoted Kane Development's focus to include mixed-income housing developments and community revitalization projects. The decision had been both moral and practical. Dallas needed affordable housing, and Christopher's personal story had given him credibility with community leaders who'd previously viewed him with suspicion. "What's the status on the Rebecca Lane lawsuit?" asked Tom Rodriguez, his head of legal. "Settled out of court last week. She dropped all claims of wrongful termination in exchange for a standard severance package." Christopher had learned that Rebecca had attempted to sue him for firing her, claiming she'd been acting in his best interests. The case had been weak from the start. She'd exceeded her authority and made legal decisions without client consent. And the Victoria Pemberton situation? Christopher laughed. Victoria sent a wedding gift and a thank you note. Turns out she was as horrified by Rebecca's engagement announcement as I was. She's happily married to a tech entrepreneur in Austin now. Dr. Helen Carter's pediatric office had become a second home to the Kane family. Today's visit was routine, Tyler and Mason's 4-year checkup, but it also marked an important legal milestone. "The DNA results are official," Dr. Carter said, handing Christopher a sealed envelope. "Though I don't think anyone was surprised by the outcome." Christopher didn't need to open the envelope. Tyler and Mason were undeniably his sons, from their stubborn chin to their grandmother's distinctive eyes. But having legal documentation meant their birth certificates could be amended, their inheritance rights secured, and their future protected. "Daddy, when do we get shots?" Tyler asked with the stoic bravery of a 4-year-old who'd learned that medical appointments sometimes involved temporary discomfort. "Not today, buddy. Just measurements and questions." Mason was more interested in the scale that measured his height. "I'm big like Daddy." "You're both getting so big," Dr. Carter agreed. "And so healthy. It's clear they're thriving in a stable, loving environment." The comment was more than medical observation. It was the final piece of documentation needed for the family court. Judge Foster had required periodic wellness checks as part of the joint custody agreement, ensuring that Christopher's newfound commitment to fatherhood was consistent and healthy for the children. "How's the adjustment been?" Dr. Carter asked as she completed her examination. "I know blended families can face unique challenges." "We're not blended," Tyler announced with 4-year-old authority. "We're just a family." Christopher and Keisha exchanged smiles. Out of the mouths of babes. Henderson Elementary School's main office buzzed with the controlled chaos that came with the first day back after winter break. Principal Keisha Kane, she'd kept her maiden name professionally but taken Christopher's legally, reviewed enrollment numbers with her assistant while fielding calls from parents and coordinating with teachers. "Mrs. Kane, Channel 8 is here for the interview about the literacy program," announced Maria Santos, the school secretary. "Send them to the library. I'll be right there." The literacy program had been Keisha's brainchild, a community initiative that brought volunteer readers into classrooms while providing take-home books for families who couldn't afford them. Kane Development had funded the initial setup, but Keisha had been careful to secure additional sponsors to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest. The reporter, a young woman named Jennifer Park, was setting up equipment when Keisha arrived. "Principal Kane, thank you for making time. I understand this literacy program has had remarkable success." It has. Reading scores in our district have improved by 30% in the past year. But more importantly, we're seeing increased parent engagement and community involvement. And I have to ask, how do you balance being a school principal with being married to one of Dallas's most prominent businessmen? Keisha had expected the question. The same way any working parent balances career and family, with good communication, shared responsibilities, and a partner who respects my professional independence. My husband understands that this work is important to me and to our community. There were critics who suggested your appointment was influenced by your husband's connections. There were. And then they saw the results. My master's degree in educational leadership, my years of classroom experience, and my track record of student achievement speak for themselves. I earned this position. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, covering the literacy program's expansion to other schools and Keisha's plans for district-wide curriculum improvements. When it was over, Jennifer Park packed up her equipment with obvious admiration. "Off the record. You're exactly what public education needs, someone who cares more about kids than politics." The backyard barbecue at the Kane house had become a monthly tradition. Patricia Morrison held court at the patio table, regaling anyone who'd listen with stories of Tyler and Mason's latest adventures while keeping a watchful eye on their interaction with other children. "Those boys get more like their daddy every day," she told Angela Davis, who'd driven down from Houston for the gathering. "Tyler's got that stubborn streak, and Mason's already trying to organize the other kids like little business meetings." Christopher appeared with a platter of hamburgers, having discovered an unexpected talent for grilling. "Patricia, stop telling embarrassing stories about me to my sons." "Honey, if I stopped doing that, what would I talk about?" The easy banter reflected how completely Patricia had been absorbed into their family structure. She'd moved into the guest house behind their main home 6 months earlier, serving as unofficial grandmother, emergency babysitter, and keeper of family wisdom. Her presence had been essential during Christopher's business travel and Keisha's evening classes for her master's degree. "Uncle Frank's here," Tyler announced, spotting Frank Donnelly from the grocery store where Keisha used to work. Frank had become an unlikely family friend, often joining their gatherings with stories from his own children and grandchildren. The guest list reflected how their family had expanded beyond blood relations to include the community they'd built through shared experiences and genuine affection. The family meeting took place in Christopher's home office, a space that had been redesigned to accommodate both his business needs and family life. Tax documents and custody agreements shared desk space with Tyler's artwork and Mason's latest Lego creation. "The children's trust funds are established," explained David Garrett, their family attorney and Christopher's replacement for Rebecca Lane. "Each boy will receive access to educational funds at 18, partial inheritance at 25, and full inheritance at 30, with provisions for earlier access in case of emergency or approved major purchases." "And the child support calculations?" Keisha asked. She'd insisted on formal support agreements despite their marriage, wanting legal documentation that protected the boys' interests independent of their parents' relationship. Retroactive support from birth through the marriage date totals $847,000, which has been placed in a separate education and emergency fund. Current support is calculated at $12,000 per month per child, adjusted annually for inflation and Mr. Kane's income changes. The amounts were staggering by normal standards, but Christopher's wealth had continued to grow. More importantly, the formal agreements meant Tyler and Mason would never be dependent on their parents' marriage for financial security. "What about college planning?" Christopher asked. "Full ride scholarships to any accredited institution, graduate school included, plus living expenses and study abroad programs if desired. They could attend Harvard Medical School and Yale Law School consecutively without touching the principal inheritance." Keisha shook her head in amazement. Her sons would have opportunities she'd never imagined, but the money came with responsibility and structure designed to build character rather than entitlement. The charity gala at the Dallas Museum of Art represented everything Christopher had once feared about mixing his public and private lives. Tonight, he walked through the crowd with Keisha on his arm, both of them comfortable in the knowledge that they belonged together regardless of others' opinions. "Christopher! Keisha!" Victoria Pemberton approached with genuine warmth, her tech entrepreneur husband beside her. The literacy program coverage was fantastic. "You must be so proud." The conversation flowed naturally, touching on education policy, business development, and their respective children's activities. Victoria had become an unexpected friend, her initial horror at Rebecca's engagement scheme having evolved into respect for Christopher's choices and admiration for Keisha's achievements. Other interactions were equally positive. Dallas society had largely accepted the Kane family, helped by Christopher's business success and Keisha's professional accomplishments. The few holdouts who still whispered about the help were increasingly irrelevant as younger, more diverse voices gained influence in the city's social circles. "Daddy!" Tyler's voice carried across the museum's marble atrium. He and Mason were supposed to be in the children's area, but they'd apparently escaped their teenage babysitter to find their parents. "Boys, you're supposed to stay in the family room," Keisha reminded them gently. "But we wanted to see the pretty things," Mason explained, staring up at a contemporary sculpture with the same analytical expression he'd inherited from his father. Several nearby couples smiled at the interruption. Children at formal events were becoming more common as Dallas's social scene evolved to accommodate working parents and modern families. "5 more minutes," Christopher said. "Then back to the babysitter." "Deal! Deal!" they chorused, racing off to explore more art. A society photographer captured the moment. Christopher and Keisha laughing at their son's enthusiasm while surrounded by Dallas's elite. The image would run in the next month's magazine with a caption about the Kane family's commitment to arts education. The Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of Texas winter day that made everyone grateful for central heating and hot coffee. The Kane house buzzed with activity as Tyler and Mason discovered what Santa had brought, their delighted squeals mixing with Christmas music and the smell of Patricia's famous cinnamon rolls. Christopher sat on the living room floor, helping Mason assemble a complicated toy robot while Tyler worked on a puzzle nearby. Keisha curled up on the couch with her coffee, watching her family with the deep contentment that came from knowing they'd chosen each other completely. "Daddy, look!" Mason held up the completed robot with pride. "It walks! Very impressive, buddy. What are you going to name him?" "Robot Eleanor," Mason announced, surprising everyone. Tyler looked up from his puzzle. "Because Great-Grandma Eleanor watches over us, right, Daddy?" Christopher's throat tightened. "That's right, son. She'd love that you named your robot after her." Eleanor's photograph held the place of honor on the mantel, surrounded by family pictures that told the story of their journey. Christopher and Keisha's wedding, the boys' first day of preschool, family vacations, birthday parties, a visual timeline of love triumphant. "I have something for you," Keisha said, handing Christopher a small wrapped box. Inside was a watch, elegantly simple with an inscription on the back. "To the man who chose love. Tyler, Mason, and Keisha." "Turn it over," she said softly. On the other side, in smaller script, "Eleanor's legacy lives on." Christopher pulled her close, their sons climbing up to join the family embrace that had become their favorite way to start and end each day. "Any regrets?" Keisha asked, their traditional question. Christopher looked around the room, at Patricia humming in the kitchen, at Tyler and Mason already planning their next toy adventure, at the wife who'd forgiven his worst mistakes and loved him into becoming his best self. "Just one," he said. "What's that?" "I regret that it took me so long to realize that all of this, was what success actually looks like." Outside, Dallas went about its Christmas morning business. Inside the Kane house, a family that had been built from broken pieces settled in for a day of celebrating the love that had made them whole. The story was complete. Every question answered, every loose end tied, every fear conquered by love that had truly found its way home. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.